Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and particularly thank your comments at the top. I've spent most of the morning at a National Airport. I know Senator Moran was there last night. It's a horrible tragedy. The victims' families are still being notified. For those of us who live in this region, you know, it's always kind of complicated. We've got Virginia, D.C., Maryland, and a host of local jurisdictions. But last night, when this tragedy took place, and I happened to be driving by National on the way home and saw all the first responders rushing to the scene. People came from as far away as Baltimore, Fairfax County. We had DOD and federal officials there. And these first responders, as always, ran towards the tragedy. There'll be a time to figure out what happened and how we rectify it. But today, our thoughts and prayers ought to be with the families and, again, thanking our first responders. Ms. Gabbard, welcome. And congratulations on your nomination to be the next Director of National Intelligence. I'd like to begin by thanking you, literally, for your decades of public service, both in uniform and as a member of Congress from Hawaii. I applaud your continuing commitment to serve should you be confirmed. Now, the President has nominated you to be Director of National Intelligence. Most folks probably don't understand the importance of this position. If confirmed, you would lead 18 agencies of the IC. You'll also serve as the principal advisor to the President, the National Security Council, and the Homeland Security Council for all intelligence matters related to national security. And in this role, you'll be responsible for over $100 billion between the National Intelligence Program and the Military Intelligence Program, or the NIP and the MIP as we call them here. It's a position of great importance and significance to our national security, created after one of our worst national security failures, 9/11. For that reason, when Congress established this position, thanks in large part to our colleague and our friend Susan Collins, it mandated in law that any individual nominated for this position must have, and I quote, extensive national security expertise. Now, I appreciated you taking the time to meet with me, and as I noted in that office, both before and after, I continue to have significant concerns about your judgment and your qualifications to meet the standards set by law. First, as I noted previously, the D&I was created in part to make sure we had appropriate intelligence sharing, which prior to 9/11, obviously we haven't. But the mission also is to not only share information between the IC, but also with our allies. There's no legal requirement that our allies share intelligence with us. It's all predicated on trust. Trust that our allies will protect each other's secrets. Yet it appears to me you have repeatedly excused our adversaries' worst actions, and instead often blamed them on the United States and those very allies. For example, you blame NATO for Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. You rejected the conclusion that Assad used chemical weapons in Syria, despite it being the unanimous assessment of the then Trump administration's DOD, State Department, and IC, as well as the assessment of our European allies. Instead, you blame the United States for supporting terrorist groups in Syria. Now, I don't know if your intent in making those statements was to defend those dictators, or if you were simply unaware of the intelligence and how your statements would be perceived. In either case, it raises, at least for this senator, serious questions about your judgment. It also leads me to question whether you can develop the trust necessary to give our allies confidence that they can share their most sensitive intelligence with us. Make no mistake about it. If they stop sharing that intelligence, the United States will be less safe. We've seen this as recently as this past year, where because of those strong intelligence sharing between the United States and Austria, countless lives were saved by disrupting a terrorist attack that was going to take place at the Taylor Swift concert in Vienna. Second, you have been publicly outspoken in your praise and defense of Edward Snowden, someone who betrayed the trust of our nation and jeopardized the security of our country. The truth is, the vast majority of the information he stole and leaked before running off to China and Russia, might I add, had nothing to do with Americans' privacy and compromised our most important sources and methods. And in many ways, we're still paying a price for that. And I believe that Edward Snowden's action put our men and women in uniform in places like Iraq and Afghanistan at risk. You have celebrated Snowden as a, quote, brave whistleblower, and actually put forward legislation asking for his pardon. Furthermore, when given the opportunity to clarify your position in pre-hearing questions, you declined. And instead, you expressed, and again, I quote, the DNI has no role in determining whether or not Edward Snowden is a lawful whistleblower. Boy, that is troubling to me in so many ways. Not only do you think that someone who divulged secrets and then ran off to Russia should be celebrated as brave, but you don't seem to understand the DNI's role in determining whistleblower determinations. In fact, the DNI has a significant role in transmitting lawful whistleblower complaints to this committee. They're all laid out right here in the statute. And I would have serious concerns about confirming someone who cannot distinguish between complaints that are made lawfully and those that are made not. In the statute, it says the job of the DNI is to protect intelligence sources and methods from unauthorized disclosure. That's a quote. I guess I'm asking, what message would it send to have a DNI who would celebrate the work of a member of the IC or a contractor that would, on their own mission, to decide what's appropriate to leak? I don't understand that. Ms. Gabbard, let me be clear, at least in my views. I salute your service to our country, but I have serious doubts about your judgment. And those are some of the areas that I want to pursue. First, until you were nominated by the President to be the DNI, you consistently praised the actions of Edward Snowden, some who, I believe, jeopardized the security of our nation, and then, in an effort to flaunt that, fled to Russia. You even called Edward Snowden, and I quote here, a brave whistleblower. Every member of this committee supports the rights of legal whistleblowers. But Edward Snowden isn't a whistleblower. And in this case, I'm a lot closer to the chairman's words, where he said Snowden is, quote, an egotistical, serial liar and traitor who, quote, deserves to rot in jail for the rest of his life. Ms. Gabbard, a simple yes or no question. Do you still think Edward Snowden is brave?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Edward Snowden broke the law. I do not agree with or support with all of the information and intelligence that he released, nor the way in which he did it. There would have been opportunities for him to come to you on this committee or seek out the IG to release that information. The fact is, he also, even as he broke the law, released information that exposed egregious, illegal, and unconstitutional programs that are happening within our government that led to serious reforms that Congress undertook.
Chairman, we got 5 minutes. So I take your answer, and these are your quotes. Brave, please join my bipartisan legislation calling for charges to be dropped against him. Do you disagree that legislation was not appropriate? Do you believe he is brave or not?
Yeah,
back those words?
Once again, Senator, Edward Snowden broke the law. He also released information that exposed the United States government's illegal programs. Your legislation
and your words are still your beliefs. Yes or no, please.
I'm making myself very clear. Edward Snowden broke the law. He released information about the United States government's illegal activities. If I may just finish my thoughts, Senator. In this role that I've been nominated for, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will be responsible for protecting our nation's secrets, and I have 4 immediate steps that I would take to prevent another Snowden-like leak.
Ma'am, I would simply ask you again. I don't think you're going to answer. I agree with Tom Cotton. He's a traitor. You, for years, until you got chosen by President Trump, have celebrated this guy as brave. You've called for him to be pardoned, for his charges to be dropped. I cannot imagine a director of national intelligence that would say that kind of behavior is okay. How would we maintain the trust of the IC and the contractors who work for it? How would we maintain the trust of our Five Eye partners? I find it very troubling. Let me move to 702. I know other members are going to raise this. Remember, the 702 is critical to our national security. 60% of the president's daily brief, 60% of the information President Trump gets every day in a PDB will come from this. You've had a long history of opposing 702. Many members of Congress have. But one of the things you actually done that not many have is not to reform it, but you actually said you wanted to repeal it. But now, whether it's, confirmation conversion or whatever, you call 702 vital. And I'm quoting, because of significant FISA reforms have been enacted since you left Congress. Ms. Gabbard, what are the reforms that have led you to now support 702?
In the short time that I have, Senator, I will just note that my actions in legislation in Congress were done to draw attention to the egregious civil liberties violations that were occurring at that time.
Ms. Gabbard, Ms. Gabbard, I ask you a question. Please give me the courtesy of responding. You said the reforms now make you support it. What can you cite? Which reforms?
There are a number of reforms to include
in the
getting
new bill,
rid
in the new law,
that,
right?
that all of you and your wisdom.
Ms. Gabbard, my time is getting short, but I got to just tell you, after the reforms were passed into law in April of 24, you went on Joe Rogan's podcast in May. The bill is now law. And you said, quote, this bill took an already bad problem and made it many, many times worse. Again, in my mind, this is a question of judgment. 702 is critical. I appreciate this late conversion, but I'm not sure I buy it because you've had such a consistent position. Again, I know my colleague's going to raise these, but rather than standing up to dictators like Putin and Assad, you've sometimes amplified his talking points. I mean, I just do not understand how you can blame NATO for Putin's brutal invasion of Ukraine. And when Assad used chemical weapons against his own people, you didn't condemn him. I can go through all the quotes. You actually questioned Americans' intelligence. Now, you mentioned a lot about trust. And one of the things that I'm so proud on this committee is my friend Senator Burr said, we always follow the truth. I say on this committee, it's the most valuable work I do in this Senate, we have a bipartisan approach to intelligence. I think we have worked to try to keep the intelligence community and earn their trust, and frankly, earn the trust of the American people. But I, respectfully, ma'am, I just don't believe on your judgment and credibility issues that this is the appropriate role that you should take going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Collins.
Thank you. You traveled to Syria and Lebanon in January 2017. Bassam Kawam personally paid for that trip, and Bassam and his brother Ilyas accompanied you to both Lebanon and Syria. The Kawam brothers have links to the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, an ally of Hezbollah. And in fact, in 2008, the Syrian Social Nationalist Party participated in the assassination of a former Lebanese prime minister and assisted Hezbollah in Beirut. When did you become aware of the links between the Kawam brothers and the Syrian Social Nationalist Party?
Senator, thank you for your question. Just a point of clarification. I paid for my own expenses and travel on that trip. I was not aware of any accusations of these two Lebanese Americans associations until after the trip occurred.
And that's when you reimbursed?
Correct. Correct.
'Cause
Not because of, I wanted to make sure that there were no perceived conflicts of interest. I addressed this specific question to these Lebanese Americans who had organized the trip, and they vehemently denied any associations with that group.
There is not a great deal in the public record about what you and Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad discussed for so long in January of 2017. And I think there's a great deal of interest from the American people about what was discussed in that meeting. So what did you talk about? And did you press Assad on things like his use of chemical weapons, systematic torture, and the killing of so many Syrians?
Yes, Senator. Upon returning from this trip, I met with people like then Leader Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer, talked to them and answered their questions about the trip. And quite frankly, I was surprised that there was no one from the intelligence community or the State Department who reached out or showed any interest whatsoever in my takeaways from that trip. I would have been very happy to have a conversation and give them a back brief. I went with former Congressman Dennis Kucinich, who had been there many times before and who had met with Assad before. A number of topics were covered and discussed, and to directly answer your question, yes, I asked him tough questions about his own regime's actions, the use of chemical weapons and the brutal tactics that were being used against his own people.
Were you able to extract any concessions from President Assad?
No, and I didn't expect to, but I felt these issues were important to address.
According to your revised trip report, your third meeting in Syria after meeting with Assad and then his wife was with Grand Mufti Ahmad Badreddin Hassoun. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. In an October 2011 speech, the Grand Mufti warned the U.S. and Europe that we will prepare suicide bombers who are already in your countries if you bomb Syria or Lebanon. What was the goal, or what did you accomplish by meeting with Grand Mufti?
Yes, Senator, before going on the trip and during my time both in Syria and Lebanon, I made it a point to meet with different religious leaders, both Muslim leaders as well as various Christian and Catholic leaders who were there in the region. I did that both in Syria and in Lebanon to hear from them about what their concerns or thoughts were with regard to the war that was being waged at the time.
Were you aware of his threats regarding suicide bombers in the United States?
I was not and had not heard that until today.
Who vetted the people that you met with on this trip to Syria and Lebanon?
The itinerary was created by former Congressman Dennis Kucinich, his constituents who he had traveled with to Syria and Lebanon a number of times before. Some of the individuals that I met with were looked at prior to the trip. Others came up during the trip that were unexpected.
Just in complete hindsight, would you view this trip as good judgment?
Yes, Senator. And I believe that leaders, whether you be in Congress or the President of the United States, can benefit greatly by going and engaging, boots on the ground, learning and listening and meeting directly with people, whether they be adversaries or friends.
Last question. Who do you blame? Who's responsible for the war in Ukraine?
Putin started the war in Ukraine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That we got a chance to be able to spend together and be able to talk through a lot of these issues. Thanks for your service to the country, both in Congress, though you were in the wrong party at the time, and your service to the country through your service there, including in my great state in Oklahoma, that you had the opportunity to be able to serve there. I want to give an opportunity for you to be able to answer a few things on it, and I want to set some context. There's been a lot of questions about 702 and about Edward Snowden, and it may seem like this is repetitive to be able to come through it, but there are thousands of intelligence employees and folks that have also taken an oath to the country and to the Constitution. They serve our country every day. They're the folks that don't have a uniform on, that no one ever says thank you to them, and no one ever buys them lunch because people don't know who they are. But they every day put their lives on the line, and they work very hard to be able to protect Americans. And when Edward Snowden got mad at his employer that he didn't get the promotion that he wanted and started harvesting information, and then found some things that he didn't like on it, and then kept going, and then released them to media and went to China, and then went from China to Russia and became a Russian citizen and continued to be able to layer out intelligence unrelated to the civil liberties of any American, and then said, I have more and I can release them at any time I want. They don't see him as brave. They see him as a traitor. And the concern among so many here, and I think what a lot of the folks in the intelligence community that you'd have the responsibility to oversight is, they want to hear that you also believe the same thing, that not just he broke the law, but that he's a traitor, because they don't want that to ever happen again. And all the sources that they had, that they trusted and that trusted them, now their lives were at risk. And all the programs that they had that were determined lawful all collapsed, and that intelligence then was gone, and the president didn't have access to a lot of information for decision making. So this is a big deal to everybody here, because it's a big deal to everybody that you'll also oversee in that role as well. And so it's helpful for them to be able to hear your heart on this. So was Edward Snowden a traitor?
Senator, my heart is with my commitment to our Constitution and our nation's security.
Ours too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have shown throughout my almost 22 years of service in the military, as well as my time in Congress, how seriously I take the privilege of having access to classified information and our nation's secrets. And that's why I'm committed, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, to join you in making sure that there is no future Snowden-type leak. And I would do so by taking 4 specific actions. Number one, again, to make sure that there are no illegal and unconstitutional programs, limiting in a big way those who have access to our nation's top secrets through security clearance reform, making sure that every single person in the workforce knows about the legal whistleblower channels available to them, and making sure that there's a direct line available to me should anyone have concerns. If people choose to step outside of those legal channels to raise any concerns about programs or actions that exist within the intelligence community that are classified, there will be no excuse to do so, and they should be charged and prosecuted under the law.
Was he a traitor at the time when he took America's secrets, released them in public, and then ran to China and became a Russian citizen?
Senator, I'm focused on the future and how we can prevent something like this from happening again.
So
let me ask you, I've worked very hard to put your own words here in front of the committee. Not, fake news, not conspiracy theories on the internet, but the actual things that you have said. On February 23rd, 2022, at the very moment that Russian tanks were rolling across the peaceful border of Ukraine for the first time, you tweeted at 11:30 p.m. your time, "This war and suffering could have easily been avoided if Biden administration / NATO had simply acknowledged Russia's legitimate security concerns regarding Ukraine's becoming a member of NATO." Did you say that, yes or no?
I believe you're reading my tweet, Senator.
Yes is the answer. A few months later, you said on your podcast, and I quoted it, quote, "But this regime change war against Russia that the U.S. and NATO are waging via their proxy in Ukraine didn't begin when Putin invaded Ukraine. They had their eyes set on this objective long before that." Did you say that, yes or no?
I believe you're reading my tweet.
Thank
There's
you.
a lot
the answer
more.
Is yes.
You're quoting a podcast that provided much more
I'm happy to have a
context.
conversation with the chairman about whether I'm taking anything out of context. I don't think I am. And your answer is yes. Are you aware that your comments about proxy wars and Russia's legitimate security concerns, to quote your own words, are in alignment with what the Russians have said to justify their invasion of Ukraine? Yes or
Senator,
no?
I don't pay attention to Russian
So I'll
propaganda.
take
My
that as
goal is to
I'll
speak
take
the
that as
truth,
the answer is no.
regardless of whether
Thank
you like it or not.
I'll take it. That's fine. You said you are used to speaking truth to power.
Yes.
I'm shocked to hear you now say that, you know, you are agreeing. I'm not shocked because I know you said it. You are agreeing that you basically said that Putin was justified in rolling over the peaceful border of Ukraine, the first time since World War II that a free nation had been invaded by a totalitarian state. And you were there at 11:30 p.m. that night to say that you were with them, not us. And let me tell you something. You say you don't know because you don't read Russian propaganda. Russian state TV then aired your comments. Did you know that?
Senator, I think you should also quote the statement that I made criticizing Putin for his invasion of Ukraine.
What I would say, Mr. Chairman, with the last, it's up to all of us. We're the Senate. We get to decide whether we're going to confirm this nominee. Obviously, we didn't select this nominee. But can't we do better than somebody who doesn't believe in 702? Can't we believe that somebody who can't answer whether Snowden was a traitor 5 times today, who made excuses for Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, the first time that I'm aware of any American official has done that? I'm questioning her judgment. That's the issue that's at stake here. And as you said, and I totally agree, this is about our intelligence officers. And you cannot answer. Most of what we do here is in secret. This is one of the very few opportunities that you will ever have to have a conversation with this panel in public. And the record is going to be very clear about the position you took with regard to Edward Snowden. And the record is going to be very clear about your reaffirmation of the statements you made in the middle of the night when Russia was invading the free country of Ukraine. And I hope we will take that in consideration when we have this vote.
Your time has expired.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Ms. Gabbard.
Thank you.
I am going to try to get 4 questions in, so I'll be brief, and if you can reciprocate, that would be very much appreciated. We've been talking about Section 702, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and I believe it's critical that the DNI support additional reforms to protect the privacy of law-abiding Americans. In your written response to committee questions, you wrote, and I quote, "Warrants should generally be required before an agency undertakes a U.S. person query of Section 702. Is this your current position?"
Yes, it is, Senator. And as you'll note in that written response, I noted some exigent circumstances with which there may be other options. But I also want to make a note that a simple warrant requirement is ultimately going to be a policy decision that all of you will make. I would point to history, to some examples.
Time is short. I'm glad you answered in line with your written answer that you support a warrant. Section 702 also involves a huge loophole now that was included recently that could allow the government to force anyone with access to a Wi-Fi router or cable box to secretly participate in the warrantless surveillance program. Do you support, as I do, eliminating this language?
Senator, I would have to look more into that and assess, if confirmed, what the impacts of the implementation of the existing safeguards are and come back to you in Congress as you look at reauthorization.
It is a massive loophole, and I hope to hear, after you've looked at it, that you'll be supportive of my efforts.
Tulsi, good to see you. We had a nice visit in the office.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here today. It was clear from that visit in the office that we share a lot of concerns about ill-advised foreign regime change interventions, about the weaponization in certain instances of our domestic law enforcement and intel authorities. Let me talk about something, Edward Snowden, on which we may not agree. It's been recognized he fled overseas with the numbers 1.5 million classified documents. He shared them with the press. He absconded to China and Russia. Do you have any response to the bipartisan findings of the House Intel Committee, which stated that, quote, Snowden caused tremendous damage to national security, unquote, including to military, defense, and intelligence programs of great interest to America's adversaries. I'll give you an opportunity to respond, hopefully briefly.
Thank you, Senator. As I've said before, Edward Snowden broke the law, and I do not agree with how he chose to release information and the extent of the information and intelligence that he released. It's my focus on the future, and I think we can all agree that we do not want to have another Snowden-type leak, and I've laid out specific actions, if confirmed as DNI, to do that.
Okay. Well, it's notable you didn't say, yes, he clearly hurt in various ways our national security. The same House committee also reported that based on DoD assessments, should the Chinese or Russians access certain documents relating to DoD capabilities that we know Snowden stole, quote, American troops will be at greater risk in any future conflict, unquote. Do you have any reflection on this assessment?
I would be very concerned about that. I have not had access to the information or intelligence that led to that assessment, but anything that puts our men and women in uniform unnecessarily at risk should be a grave concern.
Yeah. I share that sentiment as a former Marine Corps intelligence officer. When we find that Americans, whether private citizens or contractors or uniformed personnel, have shared sensitive designs about military technology or plans to a foreign government, however well-intentioned, we rightfully throw the book at them. Snowden did just that, yet you have argued, and many times, that he should be pardoned. You introduced legislation, as has been discussed here. He's been able to publicly hide, as I see it, behind this facade of being a so-called whistleblower. But he likely endangered American lives through his actions. So as the leader of the intelligence community, how would you think you would be received based on some of these past actions to support or even to pardon Edward Snowden? Rank and file intelligence analysts and intelligence professionals. How do you think it'll be received?
I'm grateful, Senator, to have received letters of endorsement and support from many current and former individuals who've worked within the intelligence community, those who've worked or are still working within our military, because I believe they trust that my goal, my sole goal and interest is in our nation's security and upholding our oath to the Constitution. And they trust that if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will take the very specific steps that I have laid out in informing every single person within the intelligence community about the legal pathways they have to blow the whistle or to bring any concerns to the forefront, to include coming directly to members of Congress, to limit access so that we don't have people who are E3s or E4s or people in any situation taking it upon themselves to release classified information, giving them a direct line to me to once again make sure that we are all fulfilling our responsibility to
Tulsi,
ensure our national
yes.
security and uphold our Constitution.
Thank you. Tulsi, was Edward Snowden false to an obligation or false to a duty?
I don't understand what you're saying. False?
He had, yes. Did he betray a duty? But did he betray the trust of the American people? Which is, according to Merriam-Webster, that's the definition of a traitor.
Edward Snowden broke the law, and he released this information in a way that he should not have. He also acknowledged and exposed information that was unconstitutional, which drove a lot of the reforms that this body has made over the years to make sure that Americans' constitutional rights are protected.
Well, for what it's worth, Mr. Snowden is watching these proceedings. He's posted on social media even, indicating that Tulsi Gabbard should indicate that I harmed national security. This may be the rare instance in which I agree with Mr. Snowden. I think it would befit you and be helpful to the way you are perceived by members of the intelligence community if you would at least acknowledge that the greatest whistleblower in American history, so-called, harmed national security by breaking the laws of the land around our intel authorities. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Young. Senator
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Gabbard, Edward Snowden does stand out as having done particularly grave harm to our national security by revealing top secret information, including sensitive sources and methods, thus jeopardizing agents in the field. So let me ask you a question. If confirmed, would you support or recommend a pardon or any kind of clemency for Edward Snowden?
Thank you for the question, Senator Collins. If confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence, my responsibility would be to ensure the security of our nation's secrets and would not take actions to advocate for any actions related to Snowden.
So the answer is no. Is
Correct.
that correct?
for a follow-up question. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gabbard, there was an area that I believe is still uncertain, and this is what my question's about. Earlier this week, the Trump administration illegally attempted to withhold federal funds from a broad range of organizations. I'm interested in knowing what you would do if President Trump told you to withhold congressionally approved funds from the Intelligence Community Inspector General. So my question is, if President Trump orders you to withhold appropriated funds from the Inspector General, will you refuse that illegal order?
I don't believe for a second President Trump would ask me to do something that would break the law.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if you are asked about an illegal order, what will you do? You can say, oh, it'll never happen. What will you do if you're dealing with an illegal order?
My commitment has been and will be, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, to comply with the law.
Given
Are there, Senator Wyden, Senator Wyden, you've actually asked two questions already, Senator
I'm not
Wyden.
asking a question.
You've asked two questions. I said there's one question allowed. Are there others?
As you know, there has been speculation in the press that you met with Hezbollah, a terrorist organization affiliated with Iran. Have you ever knowingly met with any members, leaders, or affiliates of Hezbollah?
No, and it is an absurd accusation.
Let me ask you one final question in the short time we have left. With Hamas, ISIS-K, the Houthis, all the Iranian proxies in Syria and Iraq, Yemen, and Al-Qaeda all posing general resurgences in the Middle East, Africa, and Central Asia, I'm alarmed at the lack of focus by the IC on this threat to our safety. We don't want to have to call you back to this room after a terrorist attack and ask, how did the IC miss this? Great power competition, China, Russia, definitely pose threats to our country, but the terrorist threat is arguably the most imminent threat, according to former FBI Director Chris Wray. If confirmed, what would be your strategy to refocus the IC on the terrorist threat to our country and to Americans abroad?
Thank you, Senator. I agree with your assessment, and this speaks to the need for the ODNI to exist, to redirect those resources, identifying the gaps in intelligence so that we are able to get ahead of these threats instead of coming around after the fact and trying to assess why did we not know about this sooner so that we could have taken action to prevent it.
Thank you.
I would like to repeat my colleague's question to you. Thank you for being here. To answer these questions and for your service. Was Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, I will also repeat my answer. He broke the law.
You said earlier that you were offended by a question that my colleague from Kansas asked, which I think was his duty as somebody on this committee to fulfill his responsibility to advise and consent. We are not here to be a rubber stamp for the President of the United States. So let me ask you again, do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies believe, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden-like leak.
Media. It's not a moment to propagate theories, conspiracy theories, or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for to be confirmed as the Chief Intelligence Officer of this nation. As my colleague said, this is not about you. It's about the people that serve the intelligence agencies of the United States. Is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America? That is not a hard question to answer when the stakes are this high.
Senator, as someone who has
your
served
answer,
in
yes
uniform,
or no, is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
as someone who has worn our uniform in combat, I understand how critical our national security
Apparently
is.
you don't. Apparently you don't. Let me
just ask about anomalous health incidents. And I know you're not in the intelligence community yet, but having read, as most of us have, about these Havana syndrome incidents, what is your understanding of that now, and what are your plans?
Yeah, Senator, thank you for this question. It's been deeply concerning throughout this period, from the first time this was discovered so long ago to where we are today, that the intelligence community still has failed to identify the source and the cause for Havana syndrome, as it's commonly known, even as many people who are in service are suffering the consequences of it. I look forward, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, to addressing this, of course, making sure that those who have been impacted are getting the care that they need and deserve, but getting to the truth behind how and why this has occurred.
Are you saying that we're not any closer to understanding where these came from?
Based on my understanding, there has not been any definitive reporting from the intelligence community on the source and the cause for these anomalous health incidents.
Okay, well, perhaps you'd like to, I could follow up on the record.
I'd look forward to that.
I think there's some more public information that is recent about that. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Ms. Gabbard.
Thank you.
I am going to try to get 4 questions in, so I'll be brief, and if you can reciprocate, that would be very much appreciated. We've been talking about Section 702, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and I believe it's critical that the DNI support additional reforms to protect the privacy of law-abiding Americans. In your written response to committee questions, you wrote, and I quote, "Warrants should generally be required before an agency undertakes a U.S. person query of Section 702. Is this your current position?"
Yes, it is, Senator. And as you'll note in that written response, I noted some exigent circumstances with which there may be other options. But I also want to make a note that a simple warrant requirement is ultimately going to be a policy decision that all of you will make. I would point to history, to some examples.
Time is short. I'm glad you answered in line with your written answer that you support a warrant. Section 702 also involves a huge loophole now that was included recently that could allow the government to force anyone with access to a Wi-Fi router or cable box to secretly participate in the warrantless surveillance program. Do you support, as I do, eliminating this language?
Senator, I would have to look more into that and assess, if confirmed, what the impacts of the implementation of the existing safeguards are, and come back to you and Congress as you look at reauthorization?
It is a massive loophole, and I hope to hear after you've looked at it that you'll be supportive of my efforts. Let me turn now to the question of the Inspector General situation. Can the President of the United States refuse to fund the Inspector General for the intelligence community despite appropriations from Congress? And here I'd like a yes or no.
Senator, I don't know about the legal authorities, but I understand the essential role that the inspectors general play. And if confirmed, look forward to empowering our Inspector General to fulfill their responsibility.
Good, because Congress either has the power of the purse or it doesn't. And I think in your answer to me, you recognize that you have an independent obligation to follow the law. I think that's a constructive answer. Let me turn now to the matter of spying on journalists. You wrote in your response to the committee questions that you support the Biden administration Department of Justice's policy restricting the collection of reporters' records, and you called for the codification of those restrictions. Will you reconfirm that position this morning?
I believe strongly in the First Amendment, which protects a free press.
So you will, in effect, say that you will continue to support the Biden administration policy to protect journalists?
I'm not familiar with the specific Biden administration policy, but I believe strongly in the defense of the First Amendment.
It is a policy that restricts the collection of reporters' records, and you have called for the codification of those records, so I am going to accept that you're not changing your position, and I appreciate it. I've got time, I think, for one more question. While you were in Congress, you introduced legislation prohibiting the government from mandating that Americans' phones or apps include mechanisms to allow the government to bypass encryption or other privacy technology. In your written responses to the committee questions, you reconfirmed your opposition to these mandates. Is that still your position?
Yes, these back doors lead down a dangerous path that can undermine Americans' Fourth Amendment rights and civil liberties.
You are being very helpful by moving so quickly. Let me turn to whistleblowers. You wrote in your response that whistleblowers must have clear, protected channels to report concerns, including the unauthorized transmittal of classified information to appropriate entities such as members of Congress. Do you agree that IC whistleblowers must have a clear path to this committee and that they don't need permission from agencies to talk to us? That's a yes or no.
Senator, the answer is clearly yes. I would like to state a few other actions I would take if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence is, number one, make sure that we don't have illegal and unconstitutional programs within the intelligence community, making sure that we enact security clearance reform to limit access to our nation's top secrets, make sure that every single person in the workforce understands their rights as whistleblowers and the legal channels to take, which would include coming directly to you as members of Congress, as well as establishing a direct hotline to myself should they choose to take that path.
One last question, if I might. Would you support the declassification of the committee's full report on the CIA's torture program?
Senator, I believe in transparency. I have not seen this, and so cannot make an honest assessment for that answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cornyn. Loved ones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So many people here and throughout the halls of Congress have been very kind and expressing their condolences, and I appreciate you saying this in this setting just now. Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard, you were asked in your questionnaire about your priorities, and you listed Iran and Hamas and Hezbollah and North Korea. You also mentioned Russia, but the only thing you said about Russia in fully explaining why it's a priority is ending the war with Russia. When you talk about Russia, what are your fears or policy priorities beyond ending the war? How do you see Russia as a threat to the United States?
Senator, if confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence, it will be paramount for me to assess where our intelligence gaps may exist so that I can provide the President and all of you with the most accurate full picture of that threat assessment to directly answer your questions. I think that it is a complex environment. Russia remains a strategic competitor There are a number of concerns that have to do with their nuclear weapons, as well as how the decisions and policies that are being made by this body and by the president will impact our own national security, which is my foremost concern.
I want to make certain that in no way does Russia get a pass in either your mind or your heart, or in any policy recommendation you would make or not make.
Senator, I'm offended by the question because my sole focus, commitment, and responsibility is about our own nation, our own security, and the interests of the American people. In carrying out the responsibilities of the Director of National Intelligence, if confirmed, no country, group, or individual will get a pass in my fulfilling that responsibility of providing that full intelligence picture so that you all can make the best informed policy decisions for the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. You have my commitment to be completely objective, unbiased, and apolitical, and I hope you understand my commitment to our country's interest.
I absolutely do. You have answered my question in the manner in which I wanted to hear, that you will do this in an objective manner, provide the information necessary, and that Russia, if it's a threat, you will tell us so and tell us the details of that threat.
Yes, Senator.
How would you restructure the National Intelligence Priority Framework to better align with President Trump's national security goals?
Senator, this is a discussion, if confirmed, I look forward to having with the President and his national security advisor, again, based on the threat assessment and based on the President's priorities. He has spoken about a number of different priorities in different parts of the world. I would work with them on that National Intelligence Priorities Framework, which will serve as the foundation for the intelligence elements under ODNI.
Any recommendations that you have in mind to make to President Trump in that regard?
I want to make sure that any recommendations that I make to the President are fully informed. From where I sit now, I don't believe that I can make those recommendations. I take that responsibility seriously and wouldn't want to shortchange him without first doing the due diligence and work to make sure my recommendations are well-founded.
How will you, Lieutenant Colonel, as the DNI, if confirmed, meet the objectivity and political neutrality requirements to ensure that you're telling the White House what they need to hear and not what they want to hear? A follow-up to that is, how will you handle conflicting intelligence reports from the various members of the intelligence community and present a broad intelligence picture to the President?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator. I hope that you have confidence in my ability to extract politics from what my role will be as Director of National Intelligence, because it's something I've done for almost 22 years now of wearing the uniform, both serving in the National Guard and the Army Reserve, even while holding political office. There is a brick wall between the two, and I have fulfilled that obligation in uniform, as I will as Director of National Intelligence if confirmed. I think the President, I know the President values hearing a lot of different views, and I would make sure that in the intelligence community's responsibilities that dissenting views are not only allowed, but encouraged, and where they present themselves, make sure that the President and you as policymakers are aware so that you can make your best informed decision.
Would you agree with me that bias and prejudice, if it exists any place, exists in both sides of an issue, both partisan sides of this place called Washington, D.C., and the goal, the effort that you will make is to make certain that all the information is presented in a nonpartisan, direct, and manner based upon the facts as known?
Yes, Senator, I agree, and you have my commitment. This is essential for the American people and all of you to have faith and trust in the intelligence products that are being delivered.
One of the greatest challenges is knowing who's telling us the truth, and we need a DNI who tells the truth. True?
Yes, I have a long record of speaking truth to power and would continue that commitment if confirmed in this role.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moran. Senator King. Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Gabbard, for your service, both in Congress and in our U.S. military. I want to talk to you a little bit about your perspectives on China. How do you view China in your national security role?
Our relationship with China is one that is complex, Given how closely our economies are linked, there are a number of challenges and threats that need to be navigated with respect to China, some of which have come up most recently with this very serious cyber exploitation in Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon that seemingly took us by surprise, and the compromising of our major telecom companies and an area of significant and great concern.
So some of your past statements that are relevant to China are concerning because I don't think it fully appreciates China's perspective towards the United States. For example, with regard to TikTok. Your past statements have essentially said that requiring domestic ownership of TikTok is a violation of civil liberties, and the national security concerns are complete BS. Can you explain why you have this view on TikTok?
The position that I previously made, obviously not as a member of Congress, as you consider the TikTok legislation, were centered around the protection of Americans' First Amendment rights and the lack of data privacy legislation, frankly, that would apply to TikTok, Facebook, X, all of these different social media applications that collect on us as users of these applications. There were other provisions within that legislation that granted very vague and grandiose authorities to the president on deciding which private companies are or are not a national security threat.
So let's talk about China specifically, because this is where I want to make sure you understand what's at stake. We've had concerns over many years that when China owns infrastructure, it can manipulate that infrastructure. It can use it for spying. It could use it, turn it on or off. And you've actually addressed some of the most recent cyber attacks that we believe China had relevant participation. The challenge is if China owns TikTok, it means they can spy on the United States, on the American people. It can take all the data from our children. It can change the narrative about what people are talking about through their algorithms. If it wants to create misinformation or malign foreign influence, it's very easy. So can you understand why it's so important that we require domestic ownership of TikTok?
I understand the concern, Senator. I would just reiterate some of my concerns that I stated in the past about how this really is an issue about data privacy, because so much of what is collected by all of these, even U.S.-owned companies, can be sold to any country.
I get it, and that is a bigger issue for Congress to wrestle, and I am all in for that conversation. But I want you to appreciate China.
Senator Young, Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Gabbard, I want to first say thank you for your service to this country.
Likewise.
In Congress and in the Army, and thank you for meeting with me a couple of weeks ago, and thank you for being here today. You're nominated to lead and coordinate across the intelligence community's numerous sources of collection and analytic capabilities. In a few sentences, can you describe how you make assessments and how you're going to sift through all this intelligence and make careful and thoughtful conclusions?
Yes, Senator, there are great professionals who work within the intelligence community. I will build a strong team around me as they present the intelligence reporting to provide to the President through the President's daily brief and to respond to issues and concerns that this body has. I will welcome dissenting voices to be able to make sure that this information intelligence is thoroughly vetted prior to presenting it, and make sure that the truth is reported, whether that truth is convenient or not.
Well, thank you, Colonel Gabbard, and I appreciate that. The President and others are going to rely on that. I want to discuss such an assessment made by the IC. For years, the U.S. analyzed evidence of numerous chemical weapons attacks in Syria. Eventually, we were able to assess that Bashar al-Assad was responsible for a number of these attacks that slaughtered his own civilians. Do you accept the conclusion broadly that Assad used chemical weapons against Syrians?
Yes, and I'm on the record for years of agreeing with that broad assessment.
Thank you. Among the attacks the U.S. assessed Assad was responsible for, two that occurred in Douma and Khan Sheikhoun in Syria. As a member of Congress and as a presidential candidate, and as recently as this month, in your written responses to this committee, you have cast doubt on the assessment that Assad is culpable in these two attacks. Is that still your position?
Senator, I raised those questions given conflicting information and evidence that was presented at that time.
Okay. Well, thank you. So to help inform the public, the Trump administration released declassified intelligence in 2017 and again in 2018, showing how experts analyzed multiple types of evidence, satellite imagery, medical experts' witnesses, describing sources and showing the reasoning used to determine Assad's culpability in using these chemical weapons, including in Douma and Khan Sheikhoun in these attacks, the ones that you questioned. I have two documents I want to submit for the record, Mr. Chairman.
Admitted.
Thank you. Were you aware of the declassified assessments, the one I referenced?
Yes, I was.
And as a member of the House Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee, did you take time to review these?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And can you explain to me then why you doubted the intelligence community's conclusions in these two cases, Douma and Khan Sheikhoun, but not the others? And please be specific.
These two cases were being looked at as to be used as a pretext for major military movement, and my fear was a repeat of the deployment of another 500,000 soldiers like we saw in Iraq towards what was the Obama administration's goal, which was regime change in Syria. The question specifically that I raised around these two came about because there were two reasons. One, that assessment was made with high confidence and low information. The information that they had came from those on the ground in an al-Qaeda-controlled area, and therefore were al-Qaeda-linked sources. And there was conflicting information that came from the UN's Office on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons inspectors, as well as an MIT professor, Ted Postel,
So I want
who
to
looked
talk
at
about him
these
for a
extensively.
second. So did you look into his credentials, yes or no?
Yes.
And were you aware of his appearances on Russian Today, which is used by the Russians to disseminate government-approved messages?
No.
Were you aware Postel relied on a chemistry student with a record of defending the Assad regime?
At that time, I was not. I have been made aware since.
Do you consider this person or these two individuals now, do you consider them a better source for the chemistry of sarin gas than the U.S. intelligence community?
I assess that at the time, the information, I don't know the second person you're referring to, but MIT professor Ted Postel and the inspectors of the OPCW provided some credible questions that deserved examination.
Okay, thank you. Did you attempt to weigh Postel's claims against the significant evidence and assessments already conducted by the IC?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you. So here's my concern here, Colonel. When we began this, you described a thoughtful approach to analyzing intelligence and reaching conclusions. This is what we expect of our professionals. But we just kind of walked through how you came to question Assad's use of chemical weapons in these two cases with a different approach. And I don't reject seeking out differing viewpoints. We need to do that. But you started from a place of doubting the conclusions of the U.S. intelligence community, and then you sought out information that confirmed your viewpoint. That led you to embrace the opinions of two individuals that I think we disagree on this. You think they had expertise, I do not, and others do not. But these individuals were sympathetic to Russia and the Assad regime. It also led you to minimize or discount the overwhelmingly information that contradicted your viewpoint, including the expert assessments of our own intelligence community. And they don't get it right 100% of the time. I get that. But what I have seen makes it clear that at the same time that you were skeptical of our intelligence community's assessments, you would not apply the same skepticism to information that came from sympathizers of Russia and Assad. And I think that's something that we should all be concerned about. Thank you. And I'm sorry for going over my time.
Thank you, Senator Kelly.
And understand how you analyzed the facts leading up to your 2020 bill providing him with a pardon. there was the House committee report, which granted was redacted, but under the heading, "What damage did it cause?" were 5.5 pages of redacted material. I would have thought that would raise a question in your mind. Secondly, Edward Snowden, there are about 20 countries that don't have extradition treaties with the U.S. He chose to go to Russia, become a Russian citizen. Given that information, how did you decide to introduce a bill providing him with a pardon? Introducing a bill in the United States Congress is not the same as a tweet or a commentary on a podcast. I'm concerned about your apparent lack of interest in the scope of Edward Snowden's traitorous activities.
Senator, I've answered some version of this question many times in this hearing already. My foremost concern has been, remains, and will continue to be in upholding my oath to the Constitution to support and defend Americans' Fourth Amendment constitutional rights. If confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I'm committed to ensuring that we protect our nation's secrets by implementing a number of actions I've outlined so that those who have concerns about programs within our intelligence community, that we don't have another Snowden-like leak, and they are able to raise those concerns either directly with Congress or through any one of a number of legal paths that are available. And I think it's also important, and in line with many of the bipartisan concerns I've heard from this committee, in security classification, security clearance and classification reform, in narrowing severely those who have access to the most sensitive and compartmentalized intelligence reporting and capabilities.
Senator Baird.
Until recently, you had a clear and consistent record of opposing FISA 702. I know members on this committee already understand how important this is, but for folks who don't, this law is critical to our national security. Literally 60% on average of what goes into the president's daily brief, what President Trump will read each day in assessing what's going on in the world, comes from this important piece of law that allows us to seek out those foreigners abroad for coverage. And it's helped prevent terrorist attacks. It helps us prevent foreign cyber attacks. It helps us on a topic that a lot of folks are looking at, fentanyl trafficking. Now, many in this Congress and many on the committee have tried to reform this legislation to better balance security and civil liberties. However, you have consistently gone further. Not only did you vote against reauthorizing 702, you actually introduced legislation to fully repeal the whole thing, calling it again, quote, a blatant disregard for our Fourth Amendment constitutional rights. Now, I understand that since you've been nominated to be DNI, you've expressed a change of heart. I think that's welcome, but I have to tell you, as I view this as a job interview, as I try to make my judgment on whether you should be confirmed, I don't find your change of heart credible. Because the world today is more complex and more dangerous than ever before. And we need serious people with sufficient experience to be able to navigate that complexity. I hope you use this opportunity to address my concerns and all of the members of this committee. I appreciate again your service, and I'm looking forward to a thorough discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Gabbard, Edward Snowden does stand out as having done particularly grave harm to our national security by revealing top secret information, including sensitive sources and methods, thus jeopardizing agents in the field. So let me ask you a question. If confirmed, would you support or recommend a pardon or any kind of clemency for Edward Snowden?
Thank you for the question, Senator Collins. If confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence, my responsibility would be to ensure the security of our nation's secrets and would not take actions to advocate for any actions related to Snowden.
So the answer is no. Is that
Correct.
correct?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, one of the things I love about this committee, and I know folks who are here for Ms. Gabbard may not fully realize, but this has always been a bipartisan committee. And you know, my friend Richard Burr, who said we always kind of followed the truth. One of the things I was always proud of in the very challenging Russia investigation was, you know, people would come in, they didn't know whether the staffer was a Democrat or Republican, because we were all looking out for the same thing. Ms. Gabbard, I support and commend you for your service. But we have heard this morning taking some individuals' advice on chemical attacks, not taking American intelligence community that, as we subsequently discovered, had iffy ties, not enough due diligence. We've heard this morning on your trip to Lebanon that you weren't fully aware that the folks who originally paid for the trip had these relations and ties to this Syrian party. I know I've asked, and you and I understand on the trip that you said you met with Shia religious figures and you didn't know who were there, who they were. I can understand that, although I can't imagine Shia religious figures that in the Bekaa Valley that didn't have ties to Hezbollah. And we can have a difference of opinion on TikTok. The chairman and I feel very strongly that it is a national security threat. On 702, I'm candidly confused. I thought you answered Senator Wyden you're in favor of a warrant. Senator Cornyn, I thought you backed off of that. And then on Edward Snowden, you won't back off of Brave. You won't back off of your legislation. You won't call him a traitor. And I think, again, about this is being watched by our allies around the world. I think even RT's been tweeting about it today, blasting me. And the men and women of the intelligence community. I don't know how they're going to have confidence that if under your leadership, if somebody else stepped out, that you wouldn't take the same position that you've not walked away from on Mr. Snowden. So I guess my last question, and this is one I think was in some of the press, and I believe you and your husband took a trip to Rome last summer. And you know, I'm not talking about the conference. I think you didn't ask who paid for the trip. I just want to get this off the record right now. Not if you and your husband reimbursed, but did you pay for the trip in the outset, or
There was
who
a
made the booking?
nonprofit organization that was coordinating with the Vatican to set up this meeting that was centered around peace and security interests in the Western Hemisphere.
I'm not going to go into
that.
I
Paid
just
for
want
the
to
trip.
just make sure. So you didn't understand your trip was paid for by a gentleman named Pierre Louvarier and the Clementi Foundation?
The nonprofit,
Okay,
my
I just say,
understanding,
there
was
is
paid
extensive records
for the trip.
Mr. Louvarier has enormous ties to Konstantin Malavov. I'm mispronouncing his name, but who is somebody that America has sanctioned. I imagine we can get into this in the classified hearing, but again, the due diligence that's required before you take these trips or make these assumptions is something that I find very troubling. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warner. Ms. Gabbard, if confirmed, you'll be entrusted with our nation's most important secrets. We're all entrusted with that information to serve the American people and to keep our country safe. Unfortunately, as you said in your opening statement, we've seen too many instances in recent years of people who were trusted with classified information and went on to abuse and politicize that trust. For example, in October 2020, more than 50 former intelligence officers, many of whom still held a top secret clearance, wrote a letter invoking their credentials to make false claims about Hunter Biden's laptop, likely being Russian disinformation. Do you agree that this was an example of intelligence professionals abusing and politicizing their past positions and credentials?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do, and it is an example of what needs to end and why the American people elected President Trump to bring about those necessary reforms.
Thank you. Will you commit that no one who abuses his past position and credentials in this fashion will hold a security clearance in the future?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I want to be fair to my Democratic colleagues. Such abuses aren't just a problem on the left. Also in 2020, President Trump's former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, published a book in which he revealed sensitive conversations with the president on national security matters, including highly classified information. He didn't submit this book for review and approval to ensure that our national security secrets were protected. Do you agree that John Bolton's actions likewise undermined public trust?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Will you commit that no one who so abuses his past position and risks the exposure of classified information by publishing a book without submitting it for review and getting approval before publication will hold a security clearance again or be trusted with classified information again?
Yes.
Thank you. Let's move on to the topic of ODNI reform that I mentioned in my opening statement. Congress originally envisioned the ODNI to be a small coordinating agency that directs, rather than replicates, the now 18 constituent agencies that make up our intelligence community. Over the years, however, the ODNI has strayed from this vision to an organization that now publicly boasts nearly 2,000 people, more than half of whom are not detailed from an intelligence agency, but rather are career ODNI bureaucrats. They've even developed centers that are producing their own analysis. Will you commit today to working with this committee to restoring the ODNI to its original size, scope, and function?
Yes, Senator, I look forward to working with you and the committee as I, if confirmed, assess the current status of who is working in the ODNI and the function that they fulfill to make sure of its effectiveness and elimination of redundancies and bloating.
Thank you. Do you support some of the policy proposals I mentioned in my opening statement about capping the size of the ODNI, eliminating ODNI taxes, returning employees back to their home agencies to do real intelligence work?
Yes, Senator, I look forward to working with you as we assess where the ODNI needs to be in order to fulfill its core mission and function.
Thank you. And in your preparation for this hearing and this important responsibility, have you developed any thoughts that explains the mission creep and the empire building that we've seen at the ODNI in recent years?
Yes, Senator, I've had the opportunity to review the history of the ODNI, to speak to Ambassador Negroponte, the first Director of National Intelligence, as well as others who have served in this position. I think there are a number of contributing factors to the creation of centers, or not centers, but offices like the recently eliminated Office of DEI within ODNI, and other areas where I need to go in and assess the replication and the duplication of responsibilities that exist elsewhere and some of the other intelligence elements that ODNI has oversight over.
Thank you. Colleagues, I will lead by example and yield back 1 minute of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be happy to take your extra 13 seconds, but I want to go back to what I addressed at the outset. I mean, this was not only sloppy, it not only violated all procedures, but if this information had gotten out, American lives could have been lost. The Houthis had this information, could reposition their defensive systems. So I want to get a little more information about this. Director Gabbard, did you participate in the group chat with Secretary of Defense and other Trump senior officials discussing the Yemen war plans?
Senator, I don't want to get into the specifics.
Ma'am, were you on? You're not going to be willing to address. So you're not. Are you denying? Matt, will you answer my question, ma'am? You were not TG on this group chat.
I'm not going to get into the specifics.
So you refuse to acknowledge whether you were on this group chat.
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics.
Why are you going to get into the specifics? Is it because it's all classified?
Because this is currently under review by the National Security Council.
Because it's all classified? If it's not classified, share the text now.
As the White House previously stated,
is it classified or non-classified information on this text?
I can confirm.
Director Radcliffe, were you on the group chat?
Senator, I was on a signal messaging group.
So you were the John Ratcliffe on that chat?
I was.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I provide some context, Senator, to that?
Yes, but I've got a series of questions.
Well, but I think it's important because at the outset you made a couple of comments about signal messaging using encrypted apps. So that we're clear, one of the first things that happened when I was confirmed as CIA director was signal was loaded onto my computer at the CIA, as it is for most CIA officers. One of the things that I was briefed on very early, Senator, was by the CIA records management folks about the use of signal as a permissible work use. It is. That is a practice that preceded the current administration to the Biden administration.
Director Ratcliffe, I've got a series of questions. If you're making the statement, making the statement, the signal is a secure channel.
No, can I answer that? It is
I've got a series of
end-to-end decryption. So
it is.
finish,
I understand encryption.
It is permissible to use to communicate and coordinate for work purposes, provided, Senator, that any decisions that are made are also recorded through formal channels. Right. So those were procedures that were implemented. My staff implemented those processes, followed those processes, complied with those processes, and finally, just please. So my communications, to be clear, in a signal message group were entirely permissible and lawful and did not include classified information.
Well, we will make that determination, because if it's not classified, share the text with the committee. Let me go on. Director Gabbard, you are the security executive and set access guidelines for classified information. Did you contact the defense secretary or others after this specific military planning was put out and say, hey, we should be doing this in a SCIF?
There was no classified material that was shared in that.
So then if there was no classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security. Bobbing and weaving and trying to, filibuster your answer. So please answer the question. If this was Director Gabbard, if this was a rank and file intelligence officer who did this kind of careless behavior, what would you do with them?
Senator, I'll reiterate that there was no classified material that was shared in that.
And if there's no classified materials, share. And then if there's no classified materials, then you can't even answer the question whether you're on the chat. This is strangely familiar, and I think my colleagues will remember, when you couldn't answer the question, is Edward Snowden a traitor? Man, I have serious doubts about anyway. Director Gabbard, I'm going to give you this. Tweeted just 11 days ago, and I'm quoting you, any unauthorized release of classified information is a violation of the law and will be treated as such. So if this information is classified, what are you going to do?
Senator, 2 points here. First of all, there's a difference between inadvertent release versus
careless and sloppy,
malicious leaks of classified information. The second point is there was no classified information that was on the
this committee should get that information. Director Patel, my time's about out, and I'm going to use my 12 seconds up the chairman game. Director Patel, has the FBI launched any investigation of this?
Senator, I was just briefed about it late last night, this morning. I don't have an update.
I would like to get an answer by the end of the day.
At this point in the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Gabbard, I didn't intend to get into the Jeffrey Goldberg story, but something you said has sort of puzzled me. According to open source reporting at 11:44 on the morning of March 15th, Secretary Hegseth put into this group text a detailed operation plan, including targets, the weapons we were going to be using, attack sequences, and timing. And yet you've testified that nothing in that chain was classified. Wouldn't that be classified? What if that had been made public that morning before the attack took place?
Senator, I can attest to the fact that there were no classified or intelligence equities that were included in that chat group at any time.
So,
I
so the attack sequencing and timing and weapons and targets you don't consider should have been classified?
I defer to the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council on that question.
Well, you're the head of the intelligence community. You're supposed to know about classifications. So your testimony very clearly today is that nothing was in that set of texts that were classified. I'll follow up on Senator Wyden's question. If that's the case, please release that whole text stream so that the public can have a view of what actually transpired on this discussion. It's hard for me to believe that targets and timing and weapons would not have been classified. Well, let me move on. You approved this report, this annual report, prepared by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, is this submitted to the White House routinely in anticipation of its public release?
I don't know what you mean by submitted routinely.
Was this report submitted to the White House before its release today?
It was submitted to them once it was completed. I think probably around the same time it was sent to all of you.
I want to move on. One note that surprised me, I've been on this committee now this is my 13th year. Every single one of these reports that we have had has mentioned global climate change as a significant national security threat, except this one. Has something happened? Has global climate change been solved? Why is that not in this report? And who made the decision that it should not be in the report when it's been in every one of the 11 prior reports?
I can't speak to the decisions made previously, but this annual threat assessment has been focused very directly on the threats that we deem most critical to the United States and our national security. Obviously, we're aware of occurrences within the environment and how they may impact operations, but we're focused on the direct threats to Americans' safety, well-being, and security.
How about how they will impact mass migration, famine, dislocation, political violence, which is the finding, by the way, of the 2019 annual threat assessment under the first Trump administration? You don't consider that a significant national security threat?
For the intelligence community, being aware of the environment that we're operating in is a given. What I focused this annual threat assessment on, and the IC focused this threat assessment on, are the most extreme and critical direct threats to our national security.
Let me ask a direct question. Who decided climate change should be left out of this report after it's been in the prior 11? Where was that decision
I
made?
gave direction to our team at ODNI to focus on the most extreme and critical national security threats that we face.
Your direction include no comments on climate change?
Senator, as I said, I focused on the most extreme and direct national security threats.
That's not a response to my question. Did you instruct that there be no finding in terms of climate change in this report?
I don't recall giving that instruction.
Final questions in a few short seconds that I have left. You all concede, and it's in the report repeatedly, about the cyber danger from China, from Russia, from Iran. Why then is the administration deconstructing CISA? 130 people fired. The General Hawk talked about the importance of public-private cooperation. That section of CISA seems to have been disestablished. What possible policy reason is there for undermining CISA's relationship to the states with regard to elections and to the private sector with regard to cybersecurity when the cybersecurity threat is only growing? Anybody want to tackle that?
I won't speak for all of my colleagues here, but I don't believe any of us have any insight into those specific staffing decisions that have been made.
Well, let me ask you this question. You've all found, the report has found explicitly growing cyber threats, including to elections from Russia, China, Iran. Do you believe that it's in the national interest to diminish our capacity to deal with those cyber issues? Yes or no?
President Trump is focused on effects and making sure that the people that we have and the resources that we have are focused on our national security. He and his team recognize that more people doesn't necessarily always mean better effects. Those are some of the things that are driving the changes that we're seeing across the administration, is getting all of our agencies back and focused on their core mission.
General Hawk, do you agree that...
Senator King, your time is expired.
Time is up. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. And Director Gabbard, prior to your role here, we had a big storm in western North Carolina, and you were among those first from outside our state to show up. So thank you for your work there. Thank you for your ongoing work there and that of your family as well. It was good to see them when out in western North Carolina last week, so thank you. Director Hawk, so what do we need to do in regards to Volt Typhoon? There's a lot of pre-positioning that went on there. So where are we with that? And what do we need to do in regards to our power companies, whether it's generation or distribution, Duke Energy in my home state, or even the rural electric co-ops? What do we need? What have we learned, and what can I tell them?
Senator, 99% of the critical infrastructure in the United States is controlled by private companies. So that really drives us to talk about how do we partner with industry and with the commercial sector, in this case, the power sector. Volt Typhoon began when industry came to the intelligence community and said, we're seeing anomalous activity. Can you help us gain context? And we were able to bring context to that to be able to understand what the threat was and then to ultimately be able to identify who was behind that threat. Since that time, we've continued to work very closely with industry to be able to determine what are the right ways for us to be able to pursue these threats within networks to enable the interagency, to enable our partners and industry to be able to pursue them. That's the approach we have to take. It is a collaboration between the government and industry to be able to eradicate these threats, and we have continued to pursue them together since our first identification and notification that we did related to this particular threat.
Thank you. What have you done on the offensive side here in regards to, I think there were three, Salt Typhoon, Volt Typhoon, and even Flax Typhoon. Maybe there were others, but those are the three that are known.
Senator, I've been given really clear guidance in terms of what the Secretary of Defense expects in terms of our aggressive approach to be able to restore deterrence, and I look forward to talking with you about that in the closed hearing.
Look forward to that. Directors Gabbard and Ratcliffe and Patel, thank you all again for being here. So as you're all keenly aware, Section 702 of FISA is an extremely useful authority to help keep our nation safe. I also know that we need to rebuild American people's trust and confidence that such authorities are not being misused by the intelligence community to unlawfully target Americans. So since taking over your respective agencies, can you tell me and tell the American people how effective the recent changes have been in protecting privacy and civil liberties of each and every Americans? And then, if you will, comment on how useful the authority is in generating intelligence that actually protects the homeland. We'll start with you, Director Gabbard.
Senator, Section 702, which authorizes the foreign collection of non-U.S. persons outside of the United States, continues to be one of our most effective collection tools to ensure our national security. There are a number of reforms that the Senate passed, that Congress passed last year that have proven to strengthen the protections of Americans' Fourth Amendment rights. In the short time that I've been in this seat, I've seen a few examples of that directly, most recently through the FISA court, calling in an amici to come in and weigh in on a dispute regarding provisions that would further protect Americans' Fourth Amendment rights. I'll be visiting our friends at the NSA next week and doing a quote-unquote ride-along to observe directly how those reforms that Congress passed are being implemented to protect Americans' civil liberties, and look forward to reporting back after I've had that opportunity.
Thank you. Director Patel.
Thank you, Senator. With my background in FISA and 702, I just want to clearly delineate between FISA Title 1.3 and 702 collection. We need to both ardently defend its use, but also ardently support reforms that allow the American public to entrust that those charged with those capabilities are not violating the Fourth Amendment or any other violation. Speaking to Title 1, Title 3, when it comes to U.S. persons, I have already included an amendment in terms of FBI language to make sure that when a U.S. person is targeted, that the FBI specifically is responsible for culling through all exculpatory information that is reasonably known and satisfying that burden and stating it in the application. When it comes to 702, Senator, some of the biggest enterprise efforts we have had to thwart national security risk would not have occurred if 702 collection had gone dark. And the FBI continues to use that information to protect the homeland. We've had multiple takedowns in the last 6 months based on 702 and interagency collection processes. But we just need to ensure the American public, and I'm working with my team, that even in the 702 sphere, American citizens' information is protected.
Thank you all. I look forward to the discussion in the closed.
That's memorandum back in 1994.
Yes, Senator, you did, and Ukraine willingly gave up its weapons for the protection of others.
Thank you very much.
Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And obviously, my colleagues and I feel very strongly about the war planning meeting over unclassified phones. Obviously reckless, obviously dangerous, both the mishandling of classified information and the deliberate destruction of federal records are potential crimes that ought to be investigated immediately. And I want to make clear that I'm of the view that there ought to be resignation, starting with the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of Defense. Director Ratcliffe and Director Gabbard, have you participated in any other group chats with senior Trump administration officials in which classified information was shared using phones that weren't cleared for such information? Question for the two of you.
Senator, thank you for the question. I haven't, your question was, have I participated in any other group chats sharing classified information? To be clear, I haven't participated in any signal group messaging that relates to any classified information at all.
Okay. Director Gabbard?
Senator, I have the same answer. I have not participated in any signal group chat or any other chat on another app that contained any classified information.
Yeah, and I just think it's important to follow through here. Would the two of you cooperate with an audit to confirm that that is that is the case?
I have no objection.
Senator, I'll certainly comply with any follow-up that the National Security Council would deem appropriate. But again, to be clear, the use of signal message end-to-end encryption applications is permissible and was, in this case, used permissibly, at least to my understanding, and in a lawful manner.
The seriousness of this is so clear. That's why I want to have an audit, and both of you gave me an answer indicating that you would be open to that, and I appreciate it. Director Patel, you weren't in this particular group chat, but have you participated in any chats on unclassified phones with other administration officials relating to national security? And if so, on what other topics?
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Senator. Not that I can recall.
Okay. Question I have for you, Director Gabbard, involves this question of Elon Musk wasn't going to see the military's China war plans because he said he, quote, has business in China and he would be susceptible perhaps to that. That was his comment. So as DNI, you're responsible for security clearance policies across the government. Under your watch, how are you going to go about carrying out this obligation? Because I think it obviously is a very significant one in terms of American national security.
Thank you, Senator. As you know, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence provides oversight over these different 18 intelligence elements. Leaders within those elements are empowered with that responsibility to uphold the trust that the American people have placed in them. In this example that you've cited, both Secretary Hegseth as well as President Trump completely denied the assertion that Elon Musk was going to receive any kind of classified war plan brief pertaining to China or any other country.
So on the question of whether the president has the prerogative to get clearances is really the area that I want to touch on, because you're formally responsible for security clearance policies, and that's why I'm asking about it. So can a president decide who gets the clearance?
Yes.
So what about your role? You're formally responsible for security clearance policies.
That is also true.
So how do we resolve it? President just gets his way.
The elected president and commander-in-chief has the authority to provide a security clearance to those who he deems necessary.
Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member, I think we have to have a further discussion on this and figure out what the ground rules, are. I think it's clear what the director says. I just think we need more clarity, because I think you have the formal responsibility for security clearances, and now we've heard that this somehow is going to be the president's project, and I think we ought to have further discussions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Langford.
He made the point that there was no classified information contained in any of these discussions that were reported in the Atlantic Monthly. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. So, Senator, what I've related is that any information that was related from my perspective or that I observed from the intelligence perspective was not classified information. With respect to the assertions and the allegations that there was strike packages or targeting information or things that relate to DOD, as I've pointed out, the Secretary of Defense is the original classification authority for determining whether something's classified or not. And as I've understood from media reports, the Secretary of Defense has said the information was not classified.
Are you aware that the Secretary of Defense declassified this information prior to the discussion?
I'm not.
Director Gabbard, same question. You've indicated, at least the impression I got, was there was no classified information discussed. Is that correct?
Senator, my answer is the same as the director of the CIA's.
So the question has to be posed to Secretary Hegseth whether he declassified the information and at what point he did declassify it. Do you agree?
Yes, I defer questions to the Secretary of Defense.
Okay. Director Patel, are you conducting an investigation of these discussions and activities?
Thank you, Senator. As I informed the vice chairman on the same question, I found out about this late last night, early this morning, so I don't have an update for you on that.
Well, thank you. When you get an update, we'd appreciate it very much.
Yes, sir.
Director Gabbard, were you overseas during any parts of these discussions?
Yes, Senator, I was.
Were you using your private phone or a public phone for the signal discussions?
I won't speak to this because it's under review by the National Security Council. Once that review is complete, I'm sure we'll share the results with the committee.
What is under review? It's a very simple question. Are you your private phone or an officially issued phone? What could be under review?
National Security Council is reviewing all aspects of how this came to be, how the journalist was inadvertently added to the group chat, and what occurred within that chat across the board.
But so you were not going to disclose anything about whether you use the phone. Director Ratcliffe, there's been indication that the CIA has warned recently retired personnel about the vulnerabilities of Signal and other encrypted messaging applications. If that's the case, why were you discussing these issues on Signal?
Senator, Signal use, as I've said repeatedly, is permissible for work purposes. I've never said that end-to-end encryption apps like Signal are a substitute for classified systems. And I was not discussing classified information in this setting.
But as you've indicated previously, perhaps the Secretary of Defense was discussing classified information, and only he can be held accountable in terms of whether it was classified or declassified at the point when he spoke. Is that accurate?
Well, I didn't say it that way. I said the Secretary of Defense is the original classification authority, and my understanding is that his comments are that any information that he shared was not classified.
But you have no way to verify that?
I don't.
Again, this is a very troubling example and a great lapse in our intelligence and our discussion. One further point, if you are not aware of any classified information on the discussions back and forth, would it be appropriate for the author to release the entire text of what he heard or transcribed?
I think the author has released, my understanding, essentially almost all of the information as it's been related to me. I don't know what calculation the author made with regard to what information would be released or not.
Well,
but again, I can again confirm that with respect to the communications that were related, as to me, there was no classified information.
According to the article, quote, the message contained information that might be interpreted as related to actual and current intelligence operations, and the author did not disclose that information. So the question would be, if he disclosed everything he heard, in your view.
That wouldn't be classified information. I know the context of what that is, and I think the author said might be interpreted as related to intelligence information. It was not classified information.
So it goes back to my point. If he released all this information he did not release, he could do so without any liability at the federal level.
I think you're asking for a legal answer that I'm not able to give you, but.
Mr. Patel, can you opine? You're a lawyer and you're the director of the FBI. Would he face any legal liability if he released the information?
Because of the questions you and the Vice Chairman have put to me, I'm not going to prejudge the situation, and that legal call is ultimately for the Department of Justice.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr.
Senator Young.
Thank you all for being here. I'll be asking some follow-up questions, clarifications about this Signal episode in a closed setting, and try and work with all of you to bring clarity to that situation. It appears to me there's some unanswered questions. It'll take some time, I think, to get there in a more dispassionate setting. Director Gabbard, I'm going to begin today asking you some questions about emerging technology. This has been a real point of emphasis, I know, of our broader national security community for a period of time. We know that PRC is making generational investments in certain emerging tech, AI, biotech, and other areas of technology to reduce their vulnerability against any supply chain disruptions and to lead the world in some areas. As the IC assesses, the PRC is seeking to, quote, become a global S&T superpower, surpass the United States, promote self-reliance, and achieve further economic, political, and military gain. So, Director Gabbard, can you describe the actions China is taking to operationalize that IC assessment in ways that directly target the security and prosperity of everyday Americans?
Senator, what we know is that they are trying to use these capabilities as a means to continue to exploit vulnerabilities within our own critical infrastructure and our cyber technology. The critical infrastructure is a key area of concern given what we know has already been exploited, these asymmetric attacks that have been placed within our critical infrastructure that are of serious concern given how they could be exploited, especially during a time of conflict. We know that they are experiencing a boom in their generative AI capability and are competing very heavily against our own AI capabilities. Obviously, AI can and will be used across a multitude of every sector of our society, both here as we are in our own country, and we expect China to be able to continue to do the same there.
So two key areas of vulnerability to the United States, conceivably, susceptibility to cyber attacks, and as China's leveraging of AI towards misinformation, increasingly into the physical realm, they can pose threats to us as well. As follow-up, Director Ratcliffe, you know, we've had Huawei, we've had TikTok. What do you believe will be the next point of technological friction and competition between the U.S. and China? What should members of Congress be looking for?
Senator, I think I can answer this question more fully in the classified setting. What I would say is it relates to the issue of emerging technologies and matters of quantum computing and quantum sensing, and our ability to stay ahead of China on the technological curve with respect to those issues. I'd be happy to get into that in further detail in a classified setting.
Excellent. We'll dive into that. Director Haw, General, how do you see biotech playing into this broader competition?
I think it's an area that, from our perspective, has increasingly been a priority as we want to understand the approach that China's taken, and also to ensure that as we think about the president's priorities in terms of both economic and technology security, we are certainly, as a community, following DNI's guidance, that we are increasingly putting our resources to be able to ensure that we understand where China is investing in those resources and how that will impact our economy and overall the overall health of our national security.
Thank you, General. Director Gabbard, not a lot of time left on this end, but I do have a little crypto interest I wanted to communicate to you. Can you share with this committee how we're positioned to disrupt foreign cyber efforts to steal cryptocurrency, such as the North Koreans have successfully done? If others would like to pull this thread and weigh in on this question very briefly, that would be great.
Senator, we're obviously aware of North Korea's revenue generating by stealing cryptocurrency has had a significant effect on North Korea's capabilities. I defer to our technical experts on the actions that are being taken.
Senator, I think this will be a great topic when we go to closed session.
It's going to be a busy closed
Agreed.
session. Yes. Director Patel?
I agree with the general. In closed session, I can provide some details.
It's what you get when you visit with a bunch of spies. All right, Chairman.
Senator Kelly. Thank you.
All right, Chairman.
Senator Kelly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to come back to the topic of the day here, the signal chain as reported by The Atlantic. Ms. Gabbard and Mr. Ratcliffe, you each testified that there was no information operational in nature, no classified information. So I want to ask each of you just a series of, just respond yes or no. I'll start with Ms. Gabbard. In the signal chain that we have been talking about, was there any mention of a target in Yemen?
I don't remember mention of specific targets.
Any generic target?
I believe there was discussion around targets in general.
Mr. Ratcliffe.
I think that's consistent with my recollection. Again, I don't have access to that.
Was there any mention, Ms. Gabbard, of a weapon or weapons system?
I don't recall specific weapons systems being named.
I'm not talking about specific, any weapon or weapons system.
I don't recall specific names of systems or weapons being used or named within the
Well, I'm
chat.
not asking whether, I don't want you to tell me what the specific weapon was, but any weapon at all. Mr. Ratcliffe, same question.
I don't recall.
How about anything about timing? Ms. Gabbard.
I don't recall specific timing.
Was there any mention?
I won't get into the detail of the conversation, but obviously there was a significant amount of planning and internal discussions that had occurred prior to and outside of this signal chat.
Mr. Ratcliffe, you're nodding your head. Any mention of any military unit whatsoever? Mr. Ratcliffe.
Not that I recall.
Ms. Gabbard.
Not that I recall.
Okay, so I understand that DoD policy prohibits discussion of even what is called controlled unclassified information, or CUI, on unsecured devices. Are both of you aware of that DoD policy?
I haven't read that policy.
Not familiar with the DoD policy, but I would say that the Secretary of Defense is the original classification authority for DoD in deciding what would be classified information.
Ms. Gabbard, does the intelligence community have a policy that prohibits discussion of controlled unclassified information?
Yes.
It does. Okay. Controlled unclassified information, according to DoD, includes information that is information that has not been approved for public release. Would you, of what's been disclosed publicly of the signal chain, would either of you feel that that would be approved for public release? Ms. Gabbard.
The discussion that took place in that Signal chat group was a conversation reflecting national security leaders and the vice president around the president's objectives.
So yes or no, would you approve that for public release?
I don't feel I can answer that question here.
Because of the nature of this hearing?
Because of the nature of a private discussion that took place between individual leaders in our government.
It would make sense that you would not approve it for public release, wouldn't it?
There are other factors that would go into that consideration.
Mr. Ratcliffe, yes or no?
I wouldn't approve the release of classified information. Again, as I've said,
I'm not talking about classified information, Mr. Ratcliffe. I'm talking about information that has not been approved for public release. That is information that is considered controlled, unclassified information.
The principles that would have been on that would have been individuals capable of approving that for public release.
I got 20 seconds. The deliberation as to whether or not we should launch a strike on another country, would you consider that classified information, Ms. Gabbard?
Well, the information was not classified.
I'm not talking about this. I'm just talking about deliberation from principles as to whether or not we should launch a strike on another country. Would you consider that classified information? I'm not talking about what happened this week.
There are other factors that would go into determining that classification.
Mr. Ratcliffe, the deliberation between principals in our national security apparatus about whether or not to strike another country, would you consider that to be classified information?
Pre-decisional strike deliberation should be conducted through classified channels.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you to all of you, your service to the country. It matters. There are a lot of citizens of our country right now that have much greater security in their life because of the work that you do and the people that are working around you do. So I just want to say I appreciate that. For the folks in Oklahoma, they would definitely want me to be able to say thank you for your service. Let me ask a couple of questions on this. Director Gabbard, let me start with you on this. Iran has been listed as one of the top sponsors of terrorism for a very long time. They are the primary armors of Hezbollah, of Hamas, of the Houthis. They're arming the Russians to be able to kill Ukrainians. They continue to be able to destabilize the region. And just in the recent days, when many nations in the Gulf region have talked about how to provide greater stability, Iranian leadership stepped out and made very clear statements. They want a one-state solution for Israel, and it's to drive out all Jews. So this continues to be an issue not just for the region, but for Americans in particular. So my question is on this is the sanctions and the effect of sanctions, what we know about the Iranian response. Under the Biden administration, those sanctions will turn down, where, quite frankly, Iran has been able to sell $90 billion in oil on the global market to be able to rearm itself and all the others around the region. Now sanctions are now going back onto Iran again. What do we know about the effect of those sanctions?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. These sanctions have just begun to be reinstated, so the full effects have not yet borne fruit. But the message that the president has sent with his maximum pressure campaign is certainly heard. As the chairman mentioned in his opening remarks, President Trump recently sent a letter to the leader of Iran expressing his interest in direct talks in order to try to de-escalate and to prevent war, prevent Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon, but also stated that there would be military consequences if there was no direct negotiations. So President Trump is continuing to carry out his vision and mission of peace through strength, acting in the best interests of the American people. We will see what choices are made from here.
Okay,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Gabbard, were there any sources described in the Signal chat?
No, Congressman.
Were there any methods described in the signal chat?
No.
Were there any locations?
No.
Therefore, due to the fact that there were no sources, no methods, nor locations described in the signal chat, it does not make the discussion classified. Is that correct?
That is up to the Secretary of Defense determination.
The Democrats are obviously making the assertions that what was in the signal chat was classified and claiming that Secretary Hegseth put this war plan out to the world, which he clearly did not. Were there any names in the signal chat?
No.
Any targets?
No.
Any locations?
No.
Was there a unit name or location of that unit?
There was not.
Were there any routes described in the signal chat?
No.
Wouldn't an operational plan contain that type of information?
Every operational plan I've ever seen has contained that information.
Thank you. Shifting to the real threats to America, the southern border. Due to the previous administration's open border policies, they allowed over 10 million illegals into our country. And during that time, there was 1,511 terrorist-related encounters at land border ports of entry, according to CBP. As someone who fought in the war on terror, I find this deeply offensive that the previous administration would sacrifice the security and safety of the American people in the manner in which they allowed terrorists, criminals, and rapists into our country. In your testimony, you state, and I quote, "Based on the latest reporting available for a year-long period ending October 2024, cartels were largely responsible for the deaths of more than 54,000 U.S. citizens from synthetic opioids. A lot of those citizens are from my home state of Florida. Cartels, narco-terrorists, and other violent transnational criminal organizations have violated the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the United States and have also fueled human trafficking and the opioid epidemic that many of my fellow Floridians have witnessed for far too long. I applaud President Trump and his swift decision to designate the narco-terrorists and Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, and I want to thank each of you for making this a priority to fight against Mexican cartels, traffickers, narco-terrorists that have been responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. For every narco-terrorist and cartel member violating our sovereignty, poisoning the American people with fentanyl and other illicit opioids, know this: your days are numbered, and know that the full force of the U.S. government will soon address your atrocities once and for all. Director Patel, it's no secret that there is a growing presence of Mexican cartels operating fentanyl synthesis labs just over our border. Just last year, the CBP estimates that more than 21,000 pounds of fentanyl was seized at our borders. That is enough to kill more than twice the population of the world, of our country. What actions are you taking to strengthen the FBI's fight against illicit fentanyl within our borders?
Thank you, Congressman. It's good to see you. We have made it a priority at the FBI because fentanyl and illegal narcotics kill an American citizen every 7 minutes. That is a national security crisis, not just at the southern border, but at the northern border. And the Mexican cartels, along with their illicit partners in the CCP and other adversarial countries that are doing harm, are not just taking the fight down south, but they're bringing it up north. So we need to be more vigilant as to what's coming in through our northern border as well. Known and suspected terrorists are flowing in through our northern border more than they are our southern border, I would say, because of the successes we've had in closing the southern border. But when it comes to specifically to fentanyl, we are making, to date, since January 20th, 383 kilograms of seizures of illegal fentanyl, which is enough to kill 29 million Americans.
And other than enhancing border security measures, what would be the most worthwhile action the United States could take to eliminate the cartels and stop the flow of illicit fentanyl?
I got one answer for you. They're making the precursors in mainland China, and we don't have the authorities to go after that fight there, and we need to take it head on. Because without the chemicals and precursors, there is no fentanyl, and they are moving that material around the world and into the United States too freely.
Director Gabbard, I'd like to reemphasize the threat that our adversaries are exploiting via fentanyl and other illicit drugs that are entering our country through the border and poisoning millions of Americans nationwide. It's essential that all components of our national security apparatus are united in their efforts to protect the American people and our communities from such harm. Is there any reason to believe that the Mexican government isn't doing enough to finally eradicate the cartels and other transnational criminal organizations operating just over the border?
Congressman, I can only speak from my vantage point. As was stated previously by Director Ratcliffe, we have already been introduced to and begun collaborating with our counterparts in the Mexican government. Could there be more done? I would say absolutely yes. I know that the Trump administration across his cabinet are looking at opportunities to be able to do that.
And Director Patel just hit on this with CCP and precursors, but to what extent have we seen other malicious actors worldwide partner with the cartels to infiltrate and target the United States?
Related to the production of fentanyl.
Yes, ma'am.
India is one of those countries that is providing some of those precursor materials as well as equipment.
Thank you for being here today. My time's expired.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Quigley. Thank you, Director Gabbard. We now turn to member questions. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. I want to talk about, before I get into the threats, I want to talk about something we've talked about in this committee and in this setting before. We've had IC agency leaders commit to complying with our document requests but not follow through. And I don't know if this is due to direction from previous administration or middle management obstruction, but I find it completely unacceptable. In fact, I had to subpoena the NSA in order to cooperate with our AHI investigation last year. As you all know, it's the charge of this committee to conduct rigorous oversight, and part of that oversight is to occasionally requires us that we request documents from your organizations to enable our investigations. We cannot adequately do our jobs without your partnership and your cooperation. General Hawk and General Cruz, we had this conversation here before last year, and I'm not satisfied with your responsiveness. Therefore, I'm going to ask that question again on the record in this open setting to each of you. Do I have your unequivocal commitment to cooperating with document or other information requests from this committee, General Hawk?
You do, Chairman.
Thank you, General. Director Patel.
You do, Mr. Chairman.
Director Gabbard.
Yes, Chairman.
Director Ratcliffe.
Yes, you do, Chairman and Ranking Member. And I want to start by saying it's good to be back. It's good to see you. And as you all know, I have a special appreciation for the work that this committee does, having previously been a member. I also understand the importance of the oversight role that it has. And so you have my full commitment and my understanding about what your responsibilities are and my obligation to keep you fully and currently informed, and I will do that.
Appreciate that. General Cruz.
Chairman, of course, you have our continuing support on this critically important effort for the nation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I want to turn now to something that's a topic of conversation and really needs to be, and that's our own neighborhood here in our Western Hemisphere. I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm deeply concerned about encroachment in the Western Hemisphere, not just by China, but other adversaries like Russia and Iran, from Russian military cooperation with and support to Venezuela and Nicaragua, CCP-linked companies' acquisition of critical assets in Central and South America, Iran's defense agreement with Bolivia, the establishment of a technical military cooperation commission including Venezuela, Cuba, China, Russia, and Iran. And I could list several more alarming examples. I'm afraid we focus so much of our attention across the world that we've lost sight of our own neighborhood, leading to the anti-American regimes gaining permanent footholds within striking distance of the homeland. So, Director Gabbard, to the extent that you can discuss it in this setting, what is the intelligence community's assessment of adversary encroachment in the Western Hemisphere?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll be able to go into greater detail in the closed session, but the intelligence community assessment reflects what you have just detailed and outlined. The continued competition, encroachment, and investments that are occurring in the Western Hemisphere have rapidly increased and continue to pose a threat both to our economic interests and to our security. Every day there are new reports of further attempts. One just recently that came up yesterday with investments that are being made in the southeast part of the United States. Again, I'll go into this further in a closed setting, but the intelligence assessments that we are receiving are being shared with senior cabinet officials, Department of Energy, Commerce, Treasury, those who are working alongside us to not only monitor, but to determine the best policies that will protect our interests.
Thank you. I want to turn to Director Patel real quick in the time that I have left. If you can flesh this out for me just a little bit. You indicated something that caught my attention in the proceeding yesterday, and that was your involvement with the Judicial Drug Task Force that you partner with at the state level, and how that has yielded positive results with regard to cartel activity. Can you put a little finer point on that to describe those partnerships in the 53 seconds we have remaining?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, thanks for having us, Ranking Member. My
priorities at the FBI have been to partner with state and local law enforcement in ways that we have not done so before, particularly on information sharing, and it's a two-way street. And in order for us to effectuate drug seizures and narcotics interdictions in the 50 states, we treat them as all border states, because that's what's happening. We have an American citizen die of a drug overdose every 7 minutes. That is wildly out of control and unacceptable. But the FBI cannot do that mandate and secure the American people from Washington, D.C. So we're putting resources in the field. We are working with our partners at the state and local level. And we are seeing immediate results, as we are seeing in Arkansas, as I outlined yesterday, with hundreds of arrests, thousands of pounds of narcotics seized, dozens of weapons, and multiple indictments.
Thank you, Director. I'm going to yield and recognize Ranking Member.
So ordered. And with that, I yield to Ranking Member Lynch for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the witnesses for your willingness to come forward and offer your advice and testimony to this committee. Madam Chair, for over 2 decades of service on this Oversight Committee, I've worked with members on both sides of the aisle to investigate issues of critical importance to the safety and security of the American people, including the conduct of wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, terrorist attacks against the U.S. compound classified annex in Benghazi, and several major intelligence and security breaches under Democratic and Republican administrations. So I'm sad to see that this once proud committee, the principal investigative committee in the House of Representatives, has now stooped to the lowest levels of partisanship and political theater to hold a hearing to go after the likes of Elmo and Cookie Monster and Arthur the Aardvark, all for the unforgivable sin of teaching the alphabet to low-income families' children and providing accessible local news and programming. This hearing also comes at the direction of President Trump and Elon Musk, who have repeatedly called for the defunding of all public media and claimed that media organizations such as PBS and NPR are, and I quote, a liberal disinformation machine, close quote. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is engaged in an actual disinformation campaign to minimize the catastrophic national security breach that was revealed earlier this week. As reported by Atlantic Editor-in-Chief Jeffrey Goldberg, Mr. Goldberg was inadvertently added to a group chat on an unauthorized, non-secure, publicly available message app in which Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth disclosed, quote, operational details of forthcoming strikes on Yemen, including information about targets, weapons systems, and other actions the U.S. would be taking, and also attack sequencing. I want to remind my colleagues in Congress that federal law makes it a crime when a person, through gross negligence, removes information relating to national defense from its proper place of custody or delivered to anyone in violation of this trust, ought to be lost, stolen, or abstracted or destroyed. And what's more, if evidence shows that any of the parties who were in on that signal chat lied under oath in the Senate yesterday, Mr. Ratcliffe or Ms. Gabbard, for instance, then certainly conspiracy to conceal that breach would be far worse, where center or criminal intent is in evidence, and would be more likely to invite culpability and possible criminal liability. The Secretary of Defense would be subject to criminal prosecution, and it would be the responsibility of the U.S. Attorney General to prosecute that, but where a conflict exists, it might require a special prosecutor. This security breach severely compromised the safety of American troops in advance of imminent U.S. operations and airstrikes against Houthi rebel positions. It is well documented that the Houthi arsenal includes anti-aircraft capability, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, rockets, and unmanned aerial attack drones. Mr. Goldberg, who was unwittingly elevated to the clearance level afforded to members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was also joined in the exposed group chat by Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and other senior members of President Trump's national security team. This committee should be questioning every single one of them as to why they were using an unapproved, unsecure messaging app to conduct sensitive classified discussions about military operations in which our sons and daughters in uniform are being sent into battle. One of the participants was actually sitting in Russia, using an unsecure app. And every member of this committee knows what that means. We've all been advised about which apps are secure and insecure and when it is appropriate to engage in non-critical discussions. As former chairman of our subcommittee on national security, I recall a time when just the potential for a security breach that could expose American troops and intelligence personnel to unnecessary danger would immediately trigger hearings and bring this committee to a lather on both sides. But you can bet we won't be touching this issue. Because today the controlling House majority is afraid to do its job. It is afraid to hold Trump and Trump's administration accountable. They would rather post up against Big Bird than deal with that issue. In reference to public media, Elon Musk recently asked, should your tax dollars really be paying for an organization run by people who think the truth is a distraction? Well, I would say about the same about the current administration and its proliferation of disinformation, from claims that Ukraine started its own invasion, to Secretary Heged's assertion that no one was texting war plans. You can read the text today because yesterday in the hearing they said it wasn't classified information. So you can actually go on the New York Times website and read the text that was discussed in advance of our military operations in Yemen. Madam Chair, if shame was still a thing, this hearing would be shameful. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Times for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there's something I care as much about as the national security of the United States, it's the powers and prerogatives of this Congress and its oversight duties. So I want to spend a minute or so on yesterday's testimony in front of the Senate and direct these questions in particular to Director Patel and Director Gabbard. Yesterday, Senator Heinrich asked, did this conversation, referring to the signal chat, include information on weapons packages, targets, or timing? Director Patel, you said not that I'm aware of. Director Gabbard, you said same answer. This morning we learned that the signal chat included the following update, forward-looking update from the Secretary of Defense. Time now, 11:44 Eastern Time. Weather is favorable. Just confirmed with CENTCOM. We are go for mission launch. 12:15 Eastern Time. F-18 launch. First strike package. 13:45 trigger-based F-18 first strike window starts. Target terrorist is at his known location, so should be on time. Also, strike drones launch. MQ-9s. 14:10 more F-18s launch. Second strike package. Do either of the directors want to reflect on their testimony yesterday in the context of what I just read?
Sure. One, I was not on that signal chat. Two, I have not reviewed it. And three, as you just indicated, that was made public this morning.
But Director, you didn't prior to yesterday's Senate. You were on this. You were on the signal chat, correct?
No.
Okay, but did you review the material on the signal chat?
No, I wasn't
Okay.
on it.
Director Gabbard.
Yes, Ranking Member. My answer yesterday was based on my recollection, or the lack thereof, on the details that were posted there. I was not, and what was shared today reflects the fact that I was not directly involved with that part of the signal chat, and replied at the end reflecting the effects, the very brief effects that the National Security Advisor had shared.
So it's your testimony that less than 2 weeks ago, you were on a signal chat that had all of this information about F-18s and MQ-9 Reapers and targets on strike, and you in that 2-week period simply forgot that that was there. That's your testimony?
My testimony is I did not recall the exact details of what was included there.
That was not your testimony. Your testimony was that you were not aware of anything related to weapons packages, targets, and timing.
As the testimony yesterday continued on, there were further questions related to that, where I acknowledged that there was conversation about weapons, and I don't remember the exact wording that I used, but I did not recall the specific details that were included.
Director Gabbard, we've you've reasserted that there was no classified information. I think we can all agree that that information shouldn't have been out there. But let me ask you this. Are you familiar with the ODNI's classification guidance?
I'm familiar with
I've actually
it.
got a copy right here. If I read you a part of that guidance, I wonder if you could tell me what the level of classification indicated is. I'm reading from your classification guidance. And the criteria is information providing indication or advance warning that the U.S. or its allies are preparing an attack. Do you recall what your own guidance would suggest that that be classified?
I don't have the specifics in front of me, but it would point to what was shared would fall under the DoD's classification system and the Secretary of Defense's authority
let me
to
help you, because
determine
there's
what
a
is
very clear
classified
answer.
and what is not.
You don't, I guess you don't have it, but information providing, this is the ODNI guidance, information providing indication or advance warning that the U.S. or its allies are preparing an attack should be classified as top secret. Do you disagree with that?
I don't disagree with that. I just point out that the DoD classification guidance is separate from the ODNI's classification guidance.
Do you think it would be
and
materially different?
Ultimately, the Secretary of Defense holds the authority to classify or declassify.
Do you think it's likely that DoD guidance is materially different from what I just read?
I haven't reviewed the DoD guidance, so I can't comment.
Director Gabbard, a lot of this suggests sort of a lack of sobriety. When there's punch emojis and fire emojis, it's a lack of sobriety. I don't mean that literally. But I have one last question for you, because I think people really listen to what you have to say. You, on March 15th, as DNI, retweeted a post from Ian Miles Chong, who is listed on RT, that's Russia Today's website, as, quote, a political and cultural commentator who has contributed content to RT since at least 2022. Director Gabbard, do you think that it's responsible for you as head of the intelligence community and the principal presidential intelligence advisor to retweet posts from individuals affiliated with Russian state media?
That retweet came from my personal account, and I would have to go back to look at the substance of the tweet.
Can I, just so that we don't have a lack of confusion amongst our allies and enemies and us, can I act perhaps that you not think that you should be saying one thing on your personal account than you say officially?
I maintain my First Amendment rights to be able to express my own personal views on different issues.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields now. Yields, Mr. Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to make a few things clear before we move on to other questions regarding the Signal chat. Director Gabbard, yesterday before the Senate Intelligence Committee, specifically when answering Senator Kelly, you repeatedly said you did not recall any discussion in the Houthi PC small group discussing operational details, strike targets, the type of vehicles and military units involved, or the timing and order of strikes. Do you stand by your testimony from yesterday that you do not recall any of the discussions regarding this type of classified information? Yes or no?
My response in the Senate yesterday, yes, I stand by that response. Obviously, the release of the screenshots that came from that chat group today were a refresher on what happened. As I said earlier, I was not involved with that portion of the chat, so it did not come to my recollection yesterday.
Thank you. So I take that as you stand by your do not recall yesterday stance when you're asked those questions. You've been in office 43 days. Director Radcliffe has been in office 62 days. This was considered the first major military operation using lethal force of the Trump administration. Was this the first, this was probably the first time that you've been involved with a discussion like this on a thread. It was not discussing, you were not on a group chat discussing where we're going to go for lunch. You're discussing putting men and women of the armed services in harm's way. That's a major decision. So, and when did that happen? 10 days ago? Okay, I'll answer that. It happened 10 days ago. And here's the point. Like something of this magnitude, it's something that you would not forget. It's something that most people, if you're taking this job so seriously, that you would not forget. I mean, since I've been on this committee, there's been days that I have woken up in the middle of the night from the things I've learned in the SCIF. So deciding to use military force is something hard to imagine. So the do not recall doesn't pass the smell test. It makes it's unbelievable that was the case. So that's what the American people don't understand. And I know a lot of folks in this administration were saying that they're going to take on the establishment and drain the swamp, but you have become that swamp in a matter of days, not weeks or months, days. So one of the things we're going to look into is what actually occurred, because the American people deserve a full accounting. Additionally, the main person who was involved in this thread that a lot of people want to talk to is Secretary of Defense Hegseth. And a lot of questions were brought up regarding his drinking habits in his confirmation hearing. To your knowledge, do you know whether Pete Hegseth had been drinking before he leaked classified information?
I don't have any knowledge of Secretary Hegseth's personal habits.
Director Radcliffe, same question. Yes or no?
You know, no, I'm going to answer that. I think that's an offensive line of questioning. The answer is no. I find it interesting that you want to. I'm going to answer. You asked me a question. Do you want an answer?
No, listen.
You don't want to focus on the good work that the CIA is doing, that the intelligence community.
Director, I reclaim my time. Director, I reclaim my time. Here, I have huge respect for the CIA, huge respect for our men and women in uniform. But this was a question that's on the top of minds of every American, right? He stood in front of a podium in Europe holding a drink. So of course, we want to know if his performance is compromised. If people were asking if the General Austin was compromised because of a heart issue,
was his performance compromised because of a successful strike?
Back. Mr. I bring my
you want to know? You want to talk about accepting responsibility? Do you think you should accept responsibility for a successful strike to make Americans safer? You want to focus on?
I reclaim my time. So here's the thing. This is serious. As somebody, we've been briefed in this committee about using Signal. One of the things they basically said, the most secure phone call, the least secure text messaging. And we know that your people are Russians, Chinese are on your phone.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Colts, Ms. Plaskett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to the witnesses. You know, first let me say that we do have to, in this committee, try as much as possible to remain nonpartisan as opposed to bipartisan. I can recall being that way when I was counsel on the House Ethics Committee, and it's a hard position to take. But I'm really struck by the fact that in December of 2023, many people made Secretary Lloyd Austin go through the stages of the cross in self-flagellation and mea culpas for not informing the president that he was having a surgery. And now how we're treating Secretary Hedgepeth as if he is untouchable. Mike Waltz, when he was a member of Congress, went in the Committee on Armed Services to talk about and slammed Austin for holding himself to a different standard than the American people. And yet we are not doing this across the board. And that's disappointing at the very least, very disappointing. Director Gabbard, thank you for your testimony. And one of the things that I believe I heard you say was that when there was a discussion by DOGE as to the cuts to foreign aid, that there had not been a request for an intelligence and national security or an intelligence assessment of the impact of those cuts. Was that your testimony a little earlier?
Congresswoman, I have not seen any kind of actual official assessment, either within the intelligence community or outside of it, on what the effects of those cuts to USAID programs has been.
But it was not requested by DOJ of you or of any of the areas in which you have oversight over?
I'm not aware of any requests.
Okay, great. Thank you. I know that there has been some open source reporting on what the effect of those cuts are. I mean, when we think about several examples, Kenya, our strongest regional ally in the Horn of Africa, and a key partner with us in the fight against terrorist group Al-Shabaab. And, you know, according to the Washington Post, that's not definitive, and we can talk about this in closed session. Some Kenyan journalists are now being trained by Beijing, mirroring the U.S. programs that have been cut by the administration. Director Gabbard, is letting China train Kenyan journalists going to make Kenya more or less receptive to American requests of the Kenyan government, do you believe?
As you said, Congresswoman, our relationship with Kenya has been very longstanding.
So do cuts of ours to train journalists in Kenya make them more or less, and Beijing having that make them more or less receptive?
Clearly, there is strategic competition taking place. I'll withhold my personal view to look at an official assessment.
Well, I was asking for your director view, not your personal view. And then, additionally, we have ended Voice of America, which provided accurate, unbiased news, in our opinion. Meanwhile, St. Petersburg University has announced that it's opened 11 Russian language centers across Africa that pay special attention to the promotion of traditional Russian spiritual and moral values. Director Gabbard, is Russia a friend or a foe? Are they our friend or our adversary?
They are an adversary.
Thank you. I believe that this reckless cuts make terrorism and our influence in Africa, which is on the front lines of terrorism, a real threat to us, and we need to be careful of it. Director Patel, one of the benefits of being here kind of in the middle is I get to hear other people's testimony and the questions that are asked. I know that Mr. Carson asked you questions specifically about the Counterterrorism Division. And we know that there has been some open source reporting that says that individuals within that division have been removed or been moved, not necessarily fired, but moved. Do you know if that is correct?
I don't have any personal information on that, but people within the CTD component, which is a large component of the FBI, move all the time.
And have they been moved? Are you able to get that information to us, whether they have or have not been moved?
I'll go back to my team and see who has been moved. If you have a particular interest, we'll share it with you.
Of course, we have an interest in Counterterrorism Division and movement of individuals within that. Because one of the other things I'm concerned about is you have stated, I believe in other areas, that the disbandment of certain sections of the FBI related to intel and breaking up components. Can you explain to us how you intend to do that, or what you would like to do and why?
My intention is to reprioritize counterintelligence authorities and cyber capabilities to focus on violent crime and national security, and that's what I'm doing.
The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Thank you.
The gentlewoman from Missouri, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know it's all us who are worried about this only, but apparently the Senate Armed Services Committee Chair and Ranking Member requested Inspector General report on this chat. So I'll tell you why more people are worried about this than you might think, and that's Director Gabbard, your position was created post 9/11 because of the horrible intel failure that took place there, where we weren't sharing information. It wasn't adequately shared within the community and between our allies. We have to believe that our allies look at this as a colossal mistake and will at least hesitate to a certain extent, wanting to share sensitive information with us that keeps us safe, because they're worried about their sources and methods as well. Wouldn't you be at least somewhat concerned that our allies would look at this and say, that wasn't the perfect way to communicate?
Congressman, thank you for the question. If that information that was put out in the chat by the Secretary of Defense had included specific sources and methods and targets and names, then the answer would be yes, but that was not the case.
Let me stop you there because there's such a limited time. Generals, look, you're here because you got tough spots, so I have to put you on the spots. You're passing information like this just within your agency, and you know that it's going to include, we are go for mission launch, Houthis, sea lanes, the information about the weapon systems. That gets to the Houthi military commanders. Doesn't it make you think they're at least going to say duck?
Thank you for the opportunity to weigh in on the issue. Yes, if we were collecting this on our adversaries and we're able to get this information, as was asked of General Hawk earlier, we would consider that classified, but it's classified under the collection piece. The data that we're talking about here is the operational data, not the intelligence data.
Respectfully, sir, just because we have limited time.
Secretaries.
The Houthis military leader is going to duck when he hears this, or he's going to take some action, or he's going to try to shoot our planes down, right?
If he has actionable intelligence, he will certainly use it.
I'm talking about this intelligence. You don't think he can figure out? Houthis is mentioned a couple times, sea lanes. They show the weapon system. At least it's a credible warning to him.
I would offer the Houthis' defensive position has been constant since the 15th of March.
All right. General, I'll just take a whack at it. You're the Houthis' military leader. You get this information passed on to you, it doesn't make you at least take warning?
I would, Congressman, I think from the Houthis' perspective, they do have air defense equipment, and they would be able to detect aircraft when they're entered into the Red Sea, and certainly when we have our intelligence aircraft operating over top their country. They'd be able to detect that activity.
But being forewarned is extraordinarily important. I'll take another stab at it. If just language like this, in a different context, okay? But just within your department, sir, your people are passing this information. Do you advise them maybe they don't use Signal on this? Are there other forms? Obviously, they're going to be more secure.
What I would offer is the data that we would be passing would be the full target packages and the full set of operational information.
Okay, but even if it was just this, do you really want to give the possibilities that they could be breached, hacked, and they would get this information? Wouldn't you, even with just this, sir, respectfully, wouldn't you want to use a more secure means of communicating?
I think what I would offer are two things, and hopefully they're helpful to you. One of them would be, in addition to that full package that we would talk about, when the Secretary extracted individual details from that and provided those on Signal, whether individually or in aggregate, that is his decision of what is classified and what is not from an operational aspect. And that's probably the most important relevant piece to there, and I would echo what we've said before. It's the Secretary's authority for the
just give me, there's more secure ways of communicating any of this, right?
There are, and our adversaries have
General, there are, right?
To intercept.
There's much more secure means that you use, even if you don't think that this is, or you don't want to stick your head out on it.
What I would say is the full packages were transmitted within classified, within traditional classified.
But this could have been transmitted in a classified way as well. Thank you.
Gentleman's time's expired. The gentleman from.
Thank you, Chairman, to the witnesses, many of whom I've worked with in the past. It appears that this year's report omitted any discussion of transnational concerns like global health security, infectious diseases, and the role of conflict, violence, and political instability play as drivers of migration. Coupled with the administration's cuts to USAID and other international assistance, particularly health and humanitarian assistance, won't these reductions and eliminations increase regional instability and volatility in areas already at high risk for threats? Was the IC consulted at all in the decisions to eliminate such critical funding, and why weren't these risks included in this year's report?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. The direction that I gave to our National Intelligence Council as they were putting together the annual threat assessment was to focus on the most direct and extreme threats that we face from non-state and state actors. While I acknowledge the factors that you've mentioned create an environment that our operators and intelligence officials need to be aware of, this year's annual threat assessment was really more targeted to focus on the direct threats that we have the ability to affect and impact. Some of those were included here that you mentioned with regard to the effects and impacts of USAID. That assessment has not yet been done, or at least to my knowledge, and was not considered to be included here.
Director Patel, this year's assessment, sir, confirms a threat I've worked on for a number of years, domestic extremists, including lone wolves, white nationalists motivated by racial or anti-government grievances, even religious grievances. Mr. Director, a few yes or no questions. Do you, sir, agree that these domestic threats must be addressed as thoroughly as foreign extremists?
All threats like that will be treated equally, yes, sir.
Is it true, sir, you moved personnel out of the FBI section responsible for countering domestic violent extremists?
I don't believe I did that.
Is it true, sir, that you've discussed disbanding this section?
I don't believe I've done that.
Will you pledge today, sir, not to disband this critical section?
I will pledge to you today that any personnel matters that are being worked on currently, once finalized, the congressional notification will be published to your committee.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you for the time, and I struggle, and if you look at my notes, I've changed my mind about 1,000,000 times what I'd like to talk about. I'd like to first start with Director Radcliffe. I find it offensive for you to accuse me as a Democrat of not caring about national threats. I very much wanted to talk about those, in fact, had prepared questions in advance of this hearing about those threats, specifically about biosecurity and bioterrorism, but I don't have time to ask those questions because the threat is in the House. The threat is across the dais, and I need to ask these questions. It's my job to ask these questions of you. Because when I served in the military, and I served in classified environments, had this happened to me, I would have walked my resignation in immediately. This is not okay. Communicating these sorts of things in Signal is not okay. Targets, times, those kinds of things are absolutely classified, and we all know it. I know it, these people know it, you all know it. And the fact that we're having to have these conversations now means that I can't ask the questions that I need to ask about things like bioterrorism and biosecurity. And so I'd like to put you in check as well, sir, because you can't assume who I am any more than I can assume who you are, sir. I would like to move my questions, however, over to Director Gabbard, because you are the DNI. You do have an obligation and a responsibility. I'm going to speak to you specifically about the fact that you have spent much of your 40 days talking about the importance of making sure that we don't reveal classified information, making sure that we don't leak information. You're a former battalion commander in the Army. I don't think that you would have necessarily appreciated the kind of leaking of information that I believe absolutely did happen in this Signal channel and is worthy of a further investigation. In fact, this committee established something called 50 U.S.C. 3235A, and this committee, on a bipartisan, apartisan basis, requires you, the DNI, to swiftly notify Congress and the Intelligence Committee if you're aware of any sort of significant unauthorized disclosure or compromise of classified information, which I would argue this has all of the markings of being that. And so if you, as the DNI, see such a thing anywhere within your organization's purview, you have the obligation to begin an investigation to report back to us on that. Would this seem to qualify to you as something worthy of that investigation?
Thank you for your question, Congresswoman. In this situation, Secretary Hegseth has the
Yes or
classification
no?
and
You are the
declassification
DNI.
authority over DOD information.
This chat did not have the auspice of being a DOD chat. There's no such thing as labeling it as DOD. This was a chat amongst a great variety of people, and you, according to our law that we passed here bipartisanly, have an obligation when you think there has been a tangible, significant leak of information to instigate an investigation. Do you not think it's important to do such a thing?
Well, the National Security Council is investigating
no?
this inadvertent leak. And again, I point to Secretary Hegseth as having the classification.
I
and
would argue that
classification
Secretary
authority.
Hegseth, if he had the dignity that he needs to have, should be walking his resignation in, because I believe that his probably is heading toward being relieved of his duty based on what I think are significant and illegal leaks, most likely. I would like it if you would please commit to this organization that you will follow the law, and I would like it if you would also investigate what is likely to be more than just this chat. Because if there's one, there's more than one. If there's smoke, there's fire. Would you please obligate yourself and your organization to that investigation?
Yeah, Congresswoman, yes, I will follow the law.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Director Patel, I learned just recently that you only heard about this yesterday, which blows my mind since I heard about it 2 days ago, and I'm just a low on the dais, junior chipmunk here. Did you really only hear about this yesterday?
The exact timeline I'm not aware of, but yeah, I think it was yesterday or the night
And now
before.
that another day has passed, do you
Well,
believe...
actually, it was the night before the hearing.
Now that another day has passed, do you believe that it's now time potentially for the FBI to open an investigation into this?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Because you're the director of the FBI, you don't believe it's appropriate to comment on that?
Because there's a process in place, there's an ongoing litigation, and the National Security Council is reviewing this matter. And I'm not going to discuss any open or closed
That
investigations.
ongoing investigation, literally, the lawsuit happened today or yesterday afternoon, and the idea that you don't have an opinion on this at this point is frustrating to me.
No, it's not.
My
I'm not
final
going to
question,
prejudge any
reclaiming my
matters,
time, my
and the men
final
and women of the
question, reclaiming my
FBI will
time, reclaiming
call
my
the
time,
balls and strikes.
Reclaiming my time,
not
sir.
you.
Sir, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have...
Gentlewoman's recognized. You have
Thank
4
you.
seconds remaining.
No, I have more than
You have
that
2
because
seconds
Mr.
remaining.
Patel would not acknowledge
Gentlewoman's
me.
time has expired. Mr. Stubbe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attendance and your service to national security for our country. I'm going to start with Director Patel and then go to Director Gabbard. I'm concerned, like many Americans, about the wide-scale purchase of land, real estate, et cetera, by the Chinese Communist Party or those sanctioned by the party in America, especially those lands proximate to sensitive military sites or sensitive national security sites. Director Patel, I think we can all understand that that could lead to the ease of nefarious activities of numerous sorts. What do you think should be our posture or our policy from a national security standpoint regarding the purchases of these land and the ownership, occupation, utilization, et cetera, by the Communist Party sanctioned use?
Well, Congressman, I appreciate the question, and I'm not going to shape foreign or national policy, but from the FBI perspective, if we had federal statutes to enact criminal allegations and pursue those relating to these matters, we would do so. I agree with you that having CCP actors purchasing large swaths of land next to military installations is a national security issue, a major one, and I would highlight to the American public, we're not allowed to buy farmland in mainland China or in Russia. So I don't know why we let that happen here, but that's a personal matter for me. If I were given more legislation on it, I would love to act on it.
Thank you. Director Gabbard, I'm going to look at, keeping with the same theme, crypto mining by the sanction. Well, you can't crypto mine in China, right? It's outlawed in China. However, of course, we're supportive of crypto, I am, in the United States of America, but China's mining in America where they can't mine in China. And in particular, I'm thinking about one site where the mining was occurring close to intercontinental ballistic missiles, and CFIUS was tipped off by Microsoft. And of course, there are actions ongoing. Should the Chinese Communist Party, sanctioned individuals or interests be allowed to crypto mine near sensitive military or national security sites in the United States of America? And if not, what should we be doing about it?
Thank you for your question, Congressman. I'm not fully aware and up to date on the specific example that you've mentioned, and I'll go and look into that and
Happy
and
to
get back
provide.
to you further.
Right.
Absolutely. Look forward to having the conversation with you. Broadly, this is obviously a concern, that any of these activities occurring near or around any of our military sites creates that potential national security risk and the potential for foreign intelligence collection.
I'm hoping it's a priority for everybody on the dais there. It is a priority, I think, for the American people, certainly for me. I want to move on in the time remaining with a related topic, which is the hundreds of incidents by predominantly Chinese students, oftentimes called gate crashers. So this includes the two gentlemen in uniform on the dais. I'm going to kind of point to 3 events that happened just last year. One in Grayling, Michigan. 5 Chinese students are charged for lying and concealing evidence. One in the University of Minnesota, where a drone flew over Newport News and took pictures of classified information regarding ships and classified systems. And then one at the University of Florida regarding the illicit acquisition and shipment of toxins, biomedical drugs, and research supplies to China. In these cases, or most of these cases, we encounter these people, and then we release these people. As a matter of fact, in the case of Florida, apparently she found out that criminal charges were being prepared, and she dropped out of school, and her whereabouts remain unknown at this point. What should be our posture? Because we're trying to follow up after the fact. We're encountering these people, whether they're gate crashers or whether we catch them conducting this illicit activity. We try and prosecute. That takes a lot of man hours, as you know, Director Patel. Is this the best policy, or is there something better that we can do? I mean, the Immigration Nationality Act of 1952 gives the Secretary of State the authority to revoke visas. But should these people be allowed to come to this country in the first place is the question, and what should our posture be? Anybody?
In terms of the visa issue, I know that the administration is working on a policy, but to directly answer your question, anybody who utilizes the student visa program to come to this country to conduct criminal activity should never be allowed in this country. And anyone that's doing it here in the United States of America from an FBI standpoint will be vigorously investigated, and will use the expulsion or criminal process on them.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields.